I'm casting Magic Missile.
Why are you casting Magic Missile? There's nothing to attack here.
I'm attacking the darkness.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Knights of Last Call. I'm back after a week or so absence. Obviously, had a lot going on, kind of all caught up to me. I was sick, and I'm finally feeling a bit more like myself. So here we are. I will say, get a Navage. I've used a neti pot for years. It's, you know, the thing you fill up with salt water, you pour it through your nose. But on the advice of my mother, I got a Navage. It's like a device that like pumps and sucks saline water through your sinuses. Derek Melinda approved for sure. You know, come for the dungeons, stay for the the health advice. So today is kind of a special day, if you will, in that potentially this could be the first step down a very, 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 very long road, which is that for those of you who don't know, Shadowdark is a game that Shadowdark. All right. Well, okay. There's a lot to take in here. For starters, let me just say that I really like a certain concepts or certain conceits of the old school play. But some of what old school play has become about is not necessarily what I am as excited about. In particular, I think some elements of old school play have become very focused on this sort of grim, dark, you know, fantasy fucking Vietnam grindhouse style of D&D. And I think that comes from like a false perception of what even D&D was. And I think it really comes from a lot of people having this misperception of D&D being like Tomb of Horrors or even some of the other tournament modules. But Tomb of Horrors was very specifically created by Gary Gygax to be a jerk, to be an asshole. People at that time, you know, were bragging, players were bragging that they had created such powerful D&D characters that they had essentially beaten the game. And Gary created Tomb of Horrors as a way to sort of, you know, show them that they had in fact not beaten the game. And it was designed for tournament style play. Anyways, I think a lot of people get this misperception about the game. And it's made its way into certain elements of the OSR. However, it has not made it into every element of the OSR. And Shadowdark, which came out a couple years ago, you know, and this is in complete transparency, I was somewhat dismissive of. And not because I didn't think it was great, which I think it is. I think it's very well designed. It's laid out well. It's short, brief, to the point. But I felt like it was such a homage, you know, into BX D&D that I said, for me personally, I didn't understand why I would be playing this game when I could just play BX D&D or Labyrinth Lord or Old School Essentials. And sure, it used the D20, it used advantage, it used disadvantage, which is great, which I think is great tech and is highly hated on by a lot of people for some unknown reason. But I didn't really, I didn't really put too much stock into it. If it was your brand of, you know, OSR, then it worked great for you. However, last year at Origins, I don't remember or recall why or how it came about, but I had arranged to run a multi-day Shadowdark mini adventure campaign for certain members of the Patreon of the Knights of Last Call. And Stephen Glicker stopped by for a while as well. And the joke, we ran the moat house of the village of Hamlet, so T1, right, which is like the precursor to Temple of Elemental Evil. And you know, we had a lot of fun with it, but obviously I I butchered the rules. I mean, I had never read Shadowdark. So that was like the joke, was that it was like I was running Shadowdark and I didn't know any of the rules to Shadowdark. I knew what basic D&D was, and I knew 5th edition D&D, and I was like, I'll just eyeball it and I'll just guess. So I didn't even have the book when I ran it. So, and so Kelsey was there, Kelsey Dion, and Steven, of course, is friends with her. And he introduced us and was joking about how I was running her game and fucking it up because I didn't own the game. And I had no idea what I was doing. And Kelsey, who is just as cool and just as laid back as she might appear to be on the interwebs, was basically like, oh, sounds like he's doing it great. He sounds like he's doing it right. He's doing it perfect. And so then Steven played the game with me, and then he was telling her about all the things I changed and all the horrible mangling of her rules and how I changed a bunch of stuff. And she was just like, yeah, that sounds great. That sounds awesome. And she felt bad because I was like, well, I tried to buy a copy of your book, but I couldn't. It was sold out everywhere. So cut to a few months later, I'm at Gen Con, and Kelsey wins a bunch of Ennies. And, we get to go out and, we're doing celebration and drinks and stuff like that. And she, so the next day, she says, oh, drop by the booth or whatever. And I'll get you a copy. So she was very nice enough to grant me this copy of the book. And so then that's how I acquired Shadowdark. Now, all of that is a precursor to say that I still think it's a great game. And I still think that, there's a love letter to the old school Renaissance, of which, there's a bunch of different varieties and tastes. And some people like the Carns and the Into the Odds and the Knaves. And some people like, the Dungeon Crawl Classics or whatever. But for me, what is fundamental to the old school Renaissance, the OSR, is the dungeon. And I've talked about dungeons a lot on this channel over the years. And the truth of the matter is that there aren't many games that do dungeon exploration properly well. There's a lot of reasons for that, and we can get into it. But first and foremost, it's because the modern games, and by the way, this is going to be hypocritical, because my problem with old school games is exactly the reason why I love them for dungeons. And the reason is because in a standard D20 game, or a standard traditional game nowadays, where you get your cool stuff from leveling up. And that means that the focus of the game from a mechanics standpoint is on leveling up and taking a new feat, gaining a new power. If you're playing Fabula Ultima, picking up a new class skill or a new class, or any of these games, and empowering your character through the level progression of the game. And my contention is that the appeal to an old school game, especially one set in a dungeon, is that your character, because, full disclosure, mechanically, I think this game is very boring. But I also think that, BX, which is on the back shelf, and Labyrinth Lord, and Old School Essentials, which is around here somewhere, I think those games are very boring mechanically. You don't get any kind of cool, fun widgets and powers and neat little doodads on your character sheet from leveling up. So if you are playing that game sort of raw, I think that's a really terribly boring game, because your character has nothing to it mechanically. It's just basically a bag of hit points and an attack bonus. And so there's really nothing there to be strategic with, to be tactical with, to explore with, to experiment with. And the exception being that maybe, your spellcasters get some spells. However, I think that very few people, and I'm sort of, editorializing here, but I think that very few people back in the day actually played these games, so to speak, raw. And one of the things that I really respect about Kelsey is she kind of talks about that in this book a little bit, which is that the way that you progressed in these old games wasn't through leveling up. it was through the exploration and acquisition of treasure and abilities from the game itself. And in this regard, I've used this analogy before. It's a very old analogy that goes back to the dawn of the internet. Old school characters were a lot more like Batman than they were Superman, which is that they relied on a sort of, a bag of tricks. And they acquired all of these different items that gave them their ability to sort of be very flexible tactically and strategically. Now, where did you get those items? From the dungeon. But I like to take it a step further, which is that I believe that the coolest characters are the ones that not only find cool, powerful, magical items that sort of define your character's arc, but also gain strange and unusual powers and abilities, maybe not even magical, maybe extraordinary, but they gain them through the diegetic progression of the game. And it is essentially a bespoke, custom crafted ability that is unique to your campaign and your character maybe, and that moment. And that takes a lot of work, from the GM, from the players. If you're worried about balance, forget about it, because number one, there's not a good, who knows if you're even creating something that's balanced. But secondly, that's just not what the game is trying to be about. So this is a long way of saying that I believe that there is a very fun element to these games that comes from essentially powering up your character, not leveling up your character, powering up your character through the acquisition of cool magical items and weird special abilities that you gain through playing the game. And I think that dungeons are sort of ideal for this. And thus is born the idea of the Megadungeon. Now, that's like the sort of big, huge intro. Now, how did we get here? Well, Kelsey is running so how did we get here? So two things. So one is, people have always been on me to create some sort of dungeon or something, or, because I've talked about them a bunch on the channel, but I've always been hesitant to do so because, some of the systems that are very popular, I don't think necessarily translate that well to what I just described as a sort of a structure. Pathfinder 2, 4th edition D&D, all that stuff. Even to a certain extent, 5th edition D&D. And so I've always been sort of hesitant to do it. However, recently I was very, I'll mea culpa here. Not that I was guilty, but I will own up to it. I was shocked at how well the Western Reaches Kickstarter campaign has done, and did in the first day and has done overall. Because to a certain extent, I didn't think the game was bad. I thought the game was fine. It just, I didn't understand that it had grabbed such a large audience of people who are really interested in this style of game. So that had me sort of raise my eyebrows a little bit, because ultimately I want to reach people where they're at. And sometimes that means I drag people kicking and screaming over to my side of the fence. And sometimes it means I meet them sort of halfway. And in this case, this is sort of me meeting them halfway, which is, if Shadowdark is a game that people are really excited about to the tune of a $2 million follow-up Kickstarter, then maybe there's a world where I can put together some ideas and some content that will reach those people where they're at. And where that kind of came to a head was last week on Roll for Combat stream. Steven and Mark had Kelsey on to talk about games, and I was in chat shooting the shit with them, and they were going on about hex crawls and how everything coming out now is a hex crawl, and Western, essentially Western Reaches is kind of a hex crawl in a way. And, Steven said, the dungeon is dead. Now it's all about the hex crawl. And I made a super chat, kind of making a joke, but I was kind of like, long live the dungeon. Just to prove you wrong, I'm going to make a Shadowdark Megadungeon to show you that the dungeon is not in fact dead. And I was very surprised that the response in chat was very positive. A lot of people were like, that would be awesome. Oh my God, that'd be so cool. Even Kelsey was like, yeah, that'd be awesome. You should totally do that. And it sort of kind of gave me a little bit of a little kick in the butt, a little bit of motivation. Now, this is part one of who knows how many. Could be part one of one. Maybe we never follow up with this, or this doesn't go anywhere. But maybe there's an opportunity here where we can sort of work through these working sessions, and along with my patrons, who obviously would have a much closer look at how this stuff is being developed, and have a chance to maybe input certain ideas, creations, play testing stuff. And maybe this is something that we could even, produce. Maybe this is something that we could make, because I very selfishly, Shadowdark is kind of this rising star of OSRdom, and I love Mega Dungeons. So I kind of want to selfishly, hijack the fame of Shadowdark and sort of maybe get some people to start playing in dungeons and really appreciate the dungeon style of play. And when I say dungeon, I do not mean a lair. I do not mean a one-page dungeon. I do not mean a 5-room dungeon. In fact, a 5-room dungeon to me is an oxymoron, because if something is 5 rooms, it is not a dungeon in my belief, in my parlance. There is a strong opinion. There's a strong history to this idea of the Mega. In fact, the original game of role-playing games started off in the dungeons underneath Castle Blackmore. And when Gary Gygax started inviting people over his house to run them through his new game of Dungeons and Dragons, it was in the dungeons of Castle Greyhawk. And it wasn't 5 rooms, right? It was many levels, including sub-levels and other different levels that sort of spanned a lot of weird and interesting and sometimes funny and sometimes jokey components. So Todd says, what about a delicious in dungeon? Yeah, so that I understand that we watched that as part of our Patreon. The patrons got me to watch it, and I only watched the first couple of episodes. But fundamentally, I was like, it's anime, so I didn't love it. Cracking the monster here. But Bob and Tim kept watching it on our Patreon Discord studio. But yeah, the idea, that's obviously a very popular anime, and it's essentially a big, huge mega dungeon. And there are elements, because I didn't really watch it, but I would kind of watch Tim and Bob watch it a little bit, and I would kind of jump in. The problem is they were watching it without they were watching it without dubs. So that meant I had to watch it to read it, because otherwise I wouldn't know what was happening. So I couldn't put it on in the background and do something else because I don't speak Japanese. So anyways, but yeah, from what I saw, it is very much a mega dungeon style of play where you have these different levels and they have different themes, and there's a sort of an overarching history that you're sort of, it's almost like an archaeological dig, which is something that I'm very big about mega dungeon play. Sam says 5 rooms is barely a house. Exactly. So I'm a big believer. I'm a big fan in the power of the mega dungeon. And this isn't necessarily going to be, I do want to actually get to some design work here. But obviously if you have questions or thoughts or, comments, whatever, just drop them in chat. Before we go ahead and get super started, although I guess it's been 20 minutes, I do want to rerun this here.
Sunhawk tipped $60, preemptively donating towards Shadowdark Megadungeon development.
So Shadowdark had dropped a tip offline before we even began. So I wanted to go ahead and give Sunhawk there the shout out for the Shadowdark support. So there we go. So thank you for that, Sunhawk. I mean, I'm excited that people are interested in this, and I it's a style of play that I think is very, very again, it's compelling in a way that may not be immediately obvious. Now, to be clear, if what you like about dungeon, or if what you like about D&D or fantasy role-playing games is, deep character explorations and stuff like that, I don't know that the dungeon environment is the best for that, although I guess Delicious in Dungeon sort of tries to show that you can have character development even in a dungeon. Certainly, it's an extreme environment that might push people to make to really challenge what they believe in. That is essentially the core nexus of Torchbearer, which is it's OSR adjacent, but it has it's a very complicated game with a lot of narrative elements in it. But it's really about using the dungeon as a crucible to sort of really pick apart people's goals and beliefs and instincts and identities and challenge those in the most extreme way. So Torchbearer, while fundamentally about dungeon exploration, is really more about exploring a character and using the dungeon as a way to really challenge your beliefs, which is cool. But for me, the Mega Dungeon is an environment in which the player, not the player character, in which the players can play together and can explore and can strategize and can come up with great, fun little vignettes and stories and great, sort of moments that you can tell for years to come. And some of our greatest stories as a gaming group over the last 30 years happened in dungeons. So I'm a big fan of them. So Phil says, I'm running a Beckme XP style Mega Dungeon for 5e. Coincidentally, Mega Dungeon's not dead. Yeah, I mean, I think there's definitely elements of 5e that could work. I mean, I think 5e in many ways was attempting to sort of go back to, to the dungeon. In fact, I don't know if I can find this really quickly. Probably not. When 3rd edition launched, Dungeon Magazine had these guidelines about what should your dungeon be about and how should it work, and let me see if I can find it. And how should it, what kind of adventure should you write? And basically the statement was back to the dungeon. And their idea was that when 3rd edition came out, they were like, we feel like D&D has gotten away from the dungeon, and we think that dungeons are cool, and we think that dungeons are good for game design. So, and running games of Dungeons and Dragons. And so they felt like by the end of, 2nd edition, you had all sorts of, Dark Sun and Planescape, and people had moved away from the dungeon. So 3rd edition was actually trying to move back to the dungeon. And, arguably it failed or it didn't fail. And then 4th edition, and then 5th edition, they were like, okay, after 4th edition, let's go back to the dungeon. And look at 5th edition. It's a dungeon crawling game, or at least that's the way it was sort of designed from that. Ikemo says, go Derek, make the next Shadowdark Mega Dungeon. 10 levels, 500 rooms each, none of them empty, fountains everywhere. Well, Ikemo, we're going to talk about, I don't know about 500 rooms each. That's a lot. But we'll actually discuss some of those specific things. I will say this: 10 levels. I'm right there with you. That's exactly how many levels I was thinking of doing. Fountains everywhere. Maybe not everywhere, but yes. And then none of them empty is actually an important design consideration I think that we should talk about. George, I've talked about this a lot, and you're absolutely right. So the advantage of the dungeon is that you can legitimately tell your players, go anywhere that you want, but obviously they can't go to a room that doesn't exist. So it doesn't have to be linear, but if you design an area that has 13 or 14 different rooms, and they're interconnected in various ways, the players can go and explore that way, explore some rooms, miss other rooms, find different ways, try different things. It's like being in the wilderness, but the wilderness is very difficult. It is very challenging because They could literally go anywhere. And a lot of times, wilderness encounters boil down to either a lot of empty hexes, and then they stumble into a pre-programmed hex, which triggers an encounter, or it's a bunch of random encounters, which are fun sometimes, but it can leave you feeling like, you're just kind of wandering through the wilderness, and what are you really actually doing here? Dungeons allow you to do prep. There's no doubt, there's no way around it. Dungeons are about prep. It's about doing prep in advance and setting up a situation, not a plot, a situation, not a plot, and then seeing what the players do with it and being, almost ambivalent, almost being unbiased and saying, I don't care what you do with this environment now that it is here. And when you move towards a game system that doesn't really have or care about balance, then it becomes even more appealing, because now you don't have to have this sort of because dungeons in a game that cares about balance is really tricky. It's really tough because, it's almost counter-purposed in a certain sense. Now, that doesn't mean that I don't believe that you should be putting level 10 monsters on level 1. Far from it. I think that one of the biggest strengths of a dungeon is, again, I didn't want to turn this into a whole philosophy situation here, but is for me, the problem with most games, the reason why they have to be balanced is because the way that most adventures are designed, and I apologize if you've watched and read these things a million times on our things before, so yeah, George is completely correct. So about it gives you control without railroading your players, basically, which is great because you're not railroading them. I mean, you're just saying, look, there's only 15 rooms in this dungeon. You can't go to the 16th room. It doesn't exist. But I've said this before, so I don't want to go too much on it. But for me, the reason why balance became such a huge issue in modern or role-playing games is because the adventures became so linear. And if I'm the game master and you have to go fight, this legally distinct beholder monster to get to the next part of the adventure, right? To get to the next breadcrumb, to get to the next module, to get to the next part in the adventure path, right? To complete chapter 3, to move to chapter 4, because if you don't kill him, you won't get the thing or whatever. Hey, what's up, Chase?
Chase H tipped $5. Hey. On a scale from 1 to 10, how familiar are you with the Shadowdark rules? I'm at 3/10. I ran a one-shot and loved the real-time torch timer. A very visceral mechanic. Looking forward to your thoughts on the highlights of the system.
Well, thank you for that. How familiar am I with the Shadowdark rules? I'd say a 5 out of 10. In that there's not really that many rules. I probably don't. I couldn't probably tell you what the GP value of the penance, components are for a cleric, or what the random table results are for the wizard mishap. But I mean, for the most part, it's just you have 6 stats and hit points and armor class, and that's basically the end of the game. So it's definitely not a very complex game there. Which is, I think, to the advantage. Now, you talked about real-time torches. That is something that I both like and dislike, and I'll tell you why I both like and dislike it. I dislike it for. The reason why I don't like it isn't because of the reasons that most people might think of. The reason why I dislike it, because I actually like it when we meta game the game. I've used this example before, but one of my players in a past Megadungeon, their character was a diviner, and I would send them the map of the dungeon level with no labels on it, and I would send it to them outside of the session, and I would let the player look at the map, and then during the session they could not bring it back up because I had no phones and no laptops. But if they could remember stuff, then they could remember stuff. So I like having these kind of out of game meta concepts, and so having the 1 hour torch timer, I think, is actually fine. In fact, when we played at Origins, I had a 10-minute torch timer. So I had an hourglass that I put out in front of my GM screen. So it was right in front of my GM screen. And the rule was that's how long the torch lasted. And when it ran out, okay, if I, the GM, noticed first it would immediately trigger a random encounter. So if the players got distracted, it could be in the middle of a combat. It could be in the middle of anything. If I would sometimes get distracted. Sometimes it was empty for who knows how long. It had run out and I got distracted. But if I noticed it, I would say, and then I would roll on the random encounter and they would get a random encounter. But if the players noticed before the sand ran out, they could say, they're like, I light a new torch. And when they said I light a new torch, I would just flip the hourglass over. And yes, that means that if you relit your torch 5 minutes into the 10 minutes, you only got 5 minutes on the next torch because I wasn't waiting for that thing to clear out, which meant as the players, if you wanted to maximize your torches, it was to your advantage to wait until there was just a little bit of sand left in the top and then say, I light a new torch, and then I would flip it over. And that way you might get, 9 minutes and 55 seconds out of that torch. But of course, you got distracted, especially by things like combat. And so very frequently it would run out. And then in the middle of combat, I'd be like, it's dark. And I would roll for a random encounter and more monsters would come in. So that was very intense. And to be clear, I didn't actually have the book at the time. I only knew about the 1 hour tower. Kelsey kind of actually does something about that with one of her, there's only like 1 page of optional rules there's only like probably 10 pages of rules total. But one of her optional rules is like blitz mode, I think is what it's called, which is a 30-minute timer. So the reason that I ultimately don't think that is so that's what I like about that system. What I don't like about the system is that in these kind of games, that is to say, dungeon crawling OSR style games, time can sometimes elide time and have it pass very quickly. So for example, the players enter into a room and they say, I'm like, you enter into a large temple complex. Ancient bas-reliefs cover the eastern and western walls, and at the far side of the room is an ancient altar made of some black stone, veined through with some sort of red mineral. And the players go, all right, let's spread out. Let's look at everything here. Blah blah. Like, okay, you guys are looking at everything. Like, yeah. And I might go, okay, that's going to take 30 minutes, or that might take 40 minutes. Now, back in BX days, usually you rolled a random encounter every 20 minutes. Which is called a turn. 10 minutes was called a turn, and you would roll a random encounter every 2 turns. So you could just say, hey, 40 minutes pass, and you could just say that. Now, the reason why that's kind of awkward is because how that works with the torch timer is a little bit clumsy, for lack of a better word, because for me, it's still important that the torch, like the time passing in the world is important. And, it's one of those things where it's like, I just don't want it to be like so, where the character could just be like, hey, 2 hours passes and you're like, okay, well, that only took 5 seconds, right, at the table. And so your torch is still going, and is still burning. Now that being said, you get a fairly limited number of gear slots in Shadowdark, and a torch takes up a gear slot. So, you really can't carry a ton of torches. And in fact, she actually, let me see if I actually have this here. She has a great thing in the GM section about this, where she says, running the game. Yeah. I don't exactly remember where she says it, but she basically says, like, don't, be very careful / don't just, oh, here's magical light and you're good. Like light should be something that is scary, like free. It should be a rare resource even to the, end of the game, It shouldn't be just something that like, oh, we're level 2 now, so light, torches will never matter ever again. Anyway, sorry, I've just kind of been going off on a rant. So anyway, so what I don't like about it is how it might not interact well with the in-game light, if that makes any sense. So while I do appreciate the out-of-game component of it, because again, I'm totally fine with out-of-game component, and there's this very awkward thing here, which is like, it's called real time. It says time passes in the game world at the same pace it's passing in the real world. 1 minute or 1 hour of game time is equal to 1 minute or 1 hour of real time. This matters for tracking light sources because most light sources last for only 1 hour. But it says time passes. Every moment in the game doesn't have to be accounted for in real time. For example, if the characters want to spend 10 minutes examining a room from top to bottom, the GM and players can agree, and time passes. When time passes, the GM and players move any timers down by that amount. So it's one of those things where it's like time passes and like, you know, your spells or your abilities might wear off, but the torch is, you know, kind of also real time, but also not real time. And anyways, that's where I think it's a little bit, for me, it's a little bit in the weeds. Like I get the idea of like, this is to make players not sit there and, you know, faff about. But realistically, I mean, if you played a 4-hour game session, that's 4 torches. And so, you know, that's, you know, if you have a 4 or 5 person party, that's like 1 torch per person. It's really not that much of a resource, you know, constraint in that respect. Okay, sorry, trying to get caught up here. Jamie asks, any tips or tricks for designing a Megadungeon that support West Marches style play? Yeah, Jamie, we can talk about that. I mean, long story short, that's what the Megadungeon is best at. I mean, that's how Gary Gygax ran it. Gary Gygax created a dungeon, on the Dungeon Hunter Castle Greyhawk, and I think, according to his own letters and notes, that he had as many as 30 different players who would stop by randomly throughout the week, or they would, you know, stop by and say, hey, can we stop by on Saturday? Sometimes it was 1 person, sometimes it was 2 people, sometimes it was 6 people, and they were all delving into the same dungeon. If so, you know, so the classic example is like, you know, your group might go in there and you find a secret treasure vault, but you can't get in. And so you go, okay, cool, I'll remember that for next time. And then, you know, you come back and you play a week or 2 later, and you come back and discover that treasure vault has been looted by another party, you know, but not a party member, right? Because you didn't really have a party. It was just all of you were sort of individual adventurers who might work together. So let's see here. I don't really know any of the stuff from the Cursed Zines, Sunhawk. So now that I've backed the Kickstarter for this, and you get all the past zines, I backed like the $280 version to just kind of get everything. I'm excited to take a look at that myself. Let's see here. Well, so George, I mean, you know, in classic RPG, classic RPG mentality is that, you know, time was the enemy, because time meant that you were running out of torches. Time meant, now, if you've watched our Torchbearer games, you know that Torchbearer takes this and kind of turns it up to 11, because in Torchbearer, every time anybody takes an action, it is a turn. And it's not even tied to like real time. Like, it's not like I could take an action while you're taking an action while you're taking action. No, 3 PCs in the party each take an action. That's 3 turns. A torch only lasts 2 turns. So if you do something and then your wizard buddy does something, that's 1 torch gone. And then every 4 turns, the grind happens and your character gets hungry and thirsty and your character becomes angry and afraid and exhausted and eventually just literally drops dead from time. And old school D&D had rations, had food, had torches, but also it had random encounters. And so every time passed, it was you were kind of running the risk of something bad happening. And we've talked about this before. I guess maybe we could hop over to Excalidraw. But do I even have anything open? I do. But like the reason why random encounters were scary isn't because combat was scary, which it was. It's because Shadowdark is really good at this. In Shadowdark, you literally get 0 XP for fighting monsters. And much like a person doesn't walk around with the entirety of their wealth in their pockets, monsters that are found randomly roaming typically do not have much or if anything in the way of loot, but they're just as dangerous and they're just as deadly. They can kill you just as easily, but you're not getting anything for it. So it's not just that combat is scary and dangerous and deadly, it can kill you, that makes random encounters so unappealing. It's that you're risking death for nothing. Like if you're going to go fight a bunch of orcs who could kill you with a single crit, at least be fighting them, in their lair or at the shrine where they worship some dark god or some worship Groomsh One Eye, because that way when they're dead, you can loot their riches and their ill-gotten gains and get a bunch of treasure and get a bunch of experience points. If you encounter those same orcs because you were lollygagging around in the dungeon, they could still easily kill you, but you're not getting shit. So it's kind of like it's a double whammy. It could kill you and you don't get anything if you win, essentially. What's up, Logan? Does anyone know if torches are easily fabricated? Is it as simple as stick and some cloth? No. Like most torches are soaked in some sort of oil or fat, and the cloth is actually just acting as a wick, and the stick is acting as I don't want to burn my hand off. So usually a torch has some sort of oil or fat component to it. It's not, if it was literally just cloth, it would just smolder and burn, and it'd be like the string in a candle instead of a candle. You need some sort of fuel to burn. And it's usually some sort of animal fat or some sort of pitch, tar, oil, something like that. The rule I've been using is 1 room equals 10 minutes works very well. I mean, generally speaking, old school D&D had some, had some advice about this, about how long a room should take, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not even against rolling it randomly. Why, you can give the players a rough estimate, but why tell them? Sounds like Darth Dungeons from Southern Beaches. Yeah, Darth obviously very inspired and loves dungeons and wants to tap into that zeitgeist, even in something like Southern Beaches, which is Pathfinder 2. Karama is here, says, I'm a little excited for the monster making contest. Yeah, so I'm running a monster making contest right now on the Patreon. You can win, I think, $25. We'll probably do a couple of these, but there's 4 categories. You can enter a monster for Fabula Ultima, for Pathfinder 2, for old school, D&D, Shadowdark, whatever, and then for Dragonbane. So the problem isn't the real-time tracking, but 1 hour being too generous. It doesn't stress inventory or player attention, etc. That's my general thought on it, IKMOS. I could be wrong. I'd have to play it out more and see what it really like. I mean, I think the idea here is that it's enough to be noticeable, but not enough to be a problem. But the other issue I have with it is that I don't know how well that works with time passing in the fictional world as opposed to the real world. If that makes any sense. So, for example, in Torchbearer, a torch lasts 2 turns. A turn does not map to any amount of time. A turn could be 5 minutes. A turn could be 5 hours. and a torch lasts 2 turns. So that means that if you took 2 actions that reasonably in the fiction would probably take 5 minutes and 5 minutes, that torch just lasted 10 minutes. And if it took 5 hours and 5 hours, that torch just lasted 10 hours. But that's because Torchbearer isn't really concerned about the realism and the verisimilitude. It's more of a game mechanic rather than in some sort of fictional concept. Now, obviously, these torches being meta in the sense that they're tied to the real world passing of time kind of puts them into that strange sort of space as well. I'm simply saying that for me, one of the things that I'm really interested in doing is keeping track of time passing for the characters, not just for the players. In fact, I don't even necessarily mind. Now, I don't mind the idea that time passes at the real time. You know, like if you guys sit there and debate things for 30 minutes, then 30 minutes have passed in the game. That's fine. I think that's fine. But again, my whole thing is if you have a torch lit and the group decides to do something and they're like, well, we're going to, I don't care that entryway is caved in. Let's dig it out. How long will that take? I go, you have no idea. I'm like, it could take a couple hours. It could take 6 hours. And I'm like, I'll roll D4 plus 2. And they go, okay, let's do it. I'm like, okay, you get to work. And I roll it and I go, okay, 3 hours pass. And right in real life, that just took 1 minute at the table. But does that mean that 3 hours passed that you went through 3 torches? Or because if you have your little hourglass, it only took 15 seconds. So and there's kind of this weird, and what if it only took 20 minutes? It's kind of the rules of Shadowdark do not work that way. Beowulf though. But because it says if you can't track time in your game, assume 1 hour is equal to 10 rounds. But I obviously in my experience, I'm okay just saying that it took 3 torches. And in which case, by the way, Torchbearer Shadowdark is very scary. Because now, you might go through, let's see, it's a 4-hour session plus maybe who knows how many hours pass in the dungeon. And now you're going through 10 or 15 or 20 torches, and that's most of the party's inventory. So now it's kind of like, torches might be, a little bit scary. So, Derek, I've experienced a lot of people. Some people really hate being timed for anything. And I think there's times and places for, again, I mean, the way it's written in the game, I mean, an hour is a very generous amount of time. So, but to be clear, Derek, you should feel rushed. I think that's part of the pressure, I've had a lot of people who've played these old school games and they go, I didn't like how I felt like it was scary and stressful. And it's like, I'm used to my D&D games being, I'm king of the world. I can see everything and I don't have to worry about anything. And I'm, and that's fine. I mean, that's totally acceptable. But that is not what the games are usually about. Would you use Dungeon World to run a mega dungeon like this? Absolutely. I think Dungeon World is great for running a mega dungeon, Cole. Especially, we'll see what Dungeon World 2 brings us. I actually watched that guy. What's it called? Modern TV. Is that the name of the show? He's the guy, like the wannabe knight guy, who's actually like a rich computer programmer. He's got a YouTube channel. He did a thing where he like made tallow torches and showed how like shitty they actually were. So all right. I think we kind of finally got to the end of the chat here. So here's our Shadowdark thing here. All right. So, now, before we move any further here, Derek says, yeah, I get it. I think it encourages pawn stance and cutting out the human element of playing in a game portraying a character. But for some, I know this is exactly what they crave. Exactly, Derek. I mean, ultimately, I think that that dungeon-based design, while it doesn't necessarily have to be full pawn stance, exactly, I do think it does tend to lean a bit more into the game as a challenge, and it's a challenge mode of play. And I'm not necessarily saying that I am, as a GM, adversarial, but I'm also saying I'm a little adversarial. I think part of the appeal of the dungeon is to truly create a difficult, challenging environment where success is not guaranteed, where the rules do not necessarily protect or shelter you the way that they might in, say, a more modern game. And while my job is to be fair, it does not necessarily to be balanced. And those are two totally different concepts. All right, sorry about that. It's been a while since I had to bust that out. All right. Where is my camera? That's crazy. I thought my camera was much higher than that. Okay. So, in any case, the point I was trying to make is simply that the dungeon is, I think, about overcoming those challenges. And as a result, there's a certain amount of pawn-based play. And I think that enjoying D&D as a game about just playing as these characters, playing as these adventurers, exploring a dungeon is a fun experience. Now that there's a reason why I love games like Torchbearer and why I love games like Avatar Legends and why I love games like Blades in the Dark and Fate, because they have mechanics that care about those sort of exploring character elements. And I think that's important. I think that can be really cool too. But yeah, I for me personally, I don't think that dungeons are in an old school sense are about portraying a character. I really don't. In fact, when I talk about role playing, this is what I mean. This is how the hobby started. Now that doesn't mean that people are literally treating their characters like they were Descent pieces. Like you're playing Gloomhaven or Descent. But it does mean that the player is more present than they might otherwise be. That makes some sense too. Woodland Fellowship loves that channel too. It's a great channel. I think I've watched like all of his stuff. It's great. Lugs, how do you actually handle killing a character as a DM? I reduce them to 0 hit points. I don't actually know what you're asking here, Lugs. Maybe you can kind of break it down, Lugs. So, I mean, again, I think that there is a time and a place. I mean, I think that nobody, quote unquote, likes dying. But strangely, if I'm being completely honest with you, I think that character death. I mean, let's also take a step back for a moment and think about the game of Dungeons and Dragons. I mean, Gary Gygax put in Raise Dead as a 5th level cleric spell. I mean, you get that fairly early on. You get that even before the halfway point of the game. So, it's not necessarily, while I don't think it should be like super common, like Phoenix Down, like in a, like a Final Fantasy game, I don't necessarily know that it should be the most, end of the line type thing that exists. Now, additionally, if we look at get my note, get my old stylus going here. If we look at the progression in Shadow, we'll use Shadowdark. Ooh, that is a very thick line. If we look at the progression in Shadowdark, okay, to go from 1 to 2 requires 10 XP. And to go from 2 to 3 requires 20 XP. And to go from 3 to 4 requires 40 XP, right? I'm sorry, no, I got that wrong. 30 XP. It basically requires whatever level you are is how much XP you need to get to the next level. And so to go from 4 to 5, requires 40 XP. We get the point. So let's say that everybody is 4th level, and your character dies. So you make a new character, and you start off at 1st level. Well, a couple of things to note. For starters, in a typical game, the character that just died, like if you're playing Pathfinder 2, they're 3 levels lower. They are essentially going to be useless. They have almost no benefits and almost no ability to contribute meaningfully to the game. In a game like Shadowdark, depending on what stats you randomly roll for your new 1st level character, you might actually be as powerful, or if not more powerful, than the 4th level character. The real thing that really separates a high level character from a low level character, for the most part, is just having extra hit points. And even those are randomly rolled, so it's not necessarily a thing. But so the way you could actually think about it, it's not really think of it as hit points. It's to think of it as plot armor. The 4th level character has been around longer, and they get a little bit more plot armor because the monster's damage doesn't necessarily scale linearly. It's not like a 10th level monster is going to be doing, 100 damage a hit. It's just not the way that the game works. Now, am I suggesting that a 1st level character is as survivable as a 4th level character? No. But what I am suggesting is that there's a lot of situations where a 1st level character could play with a group of 4th level PCs and actually be not just participate, but actually meaningfully participate. It's dangerous, sure. But, maybe you have to play a little cautiously. You have to play a little back. Now, the reason I bring this all up is that because for your character, this 4th level character who's going to 5th level, they need 40 XP. Well, in the time that it takes them to earn 40 XP, our character will already be level 3. So, and so now they're level 5, and we're level 3, and now they need 50. And so before they even get to 50, we're already 4th level. And in fact, by the time they reach 50, we'll be 20 XP into 4, which basically means that within a handful of sessions, we will basically be right up with them. Now, of course, we'll always be a handful of XP behind them, but we'll very quickly catch up to be within 2 levels, then with 1 level, and eventually, actually, as you get to the higher levels of the game, the same level. You'll be the same level. They'll be further along in that level, but you'll be the same level. And so, to me, as someone who enjoys the unknown experience of exploring what a character's possibility is, I find this to be actually kind of a fun process of actually just kind of being the new guy. And sort of having to you almost kind of get power leveled up a little bit. And again, I have a lot of different things to talk about and a lot of different things to talk about or discuss. But like one of the ideas that one thing that people used to be very excited about when we used to play my dungeon based games was I would have these fountains magical sources of energy, of power, of the classic magic fountain that you could drink from. And usually you could drink once and you get some sort of random ability or random bonus. Sometimes people were very excited to get to die because they were just excited to try to get a chance to drink from all the magic fountains again. Because one of the first things that a lot of times the old guys, the old girls would do is they would run the new characters through the lower or the upper levels of the dungeon so that they could drink from the fountain of magical worth, and then we'll take you to the Fey Stone and let you get a new Fey ability, and we'll take you down to the Chaos Plate and let you get energized with chaotic energies and see what cool random power you get. Plus, there was always this really fun thing of like being a level 1 character and your buddies, the players that, the friends that you're playing with go, oh, here, totally take this awesome weapon, take this cool sword, take this awesome set of bracers. And you're kind of like what we would call in MMO days, twinked out, right? Where you just have all this really cool gear and all this other stuff just because, you're level 1, but you, the player, are playing with higher level people and they're your friends. So they help you out. And I don't know, I've always found that to be a very interesting and unique experience. It really changes up the tone and nature of the game. So I do want to talk a little bit. I mean, there's a lot of stuff to discuss here about core assumptions of what a dungeon is, but and how it goes. But one of the basic ideas that we have here in the game is that as you go deeper into the dungeon, things get more difficult, and the treasures get better, and things get more magical, and things get more weird, and things get more epic, and things get more grand. Sam says, how do you make the Mega Dungeon feel like the system you're making for while keeping it feeling like a Mega Dungeon? E.g., how do you make it feel like Shadowdark instead of any other OSR? Well, Samuel Ward, I think there's a couple of key caveats here. One, Shadowdark is fairly synonymous with some of the other OSR games. So I do think that there's a very high, the Venn diagram here is very, very, very tight. That being said, for the most part, while it does have the unfortunate lineage of talking about basically the funnel session, I do feel like Shadowdark, for the most part, avoids some of the gratuitous, over-the-top, grim, dark, head decapitation type elements that are so prevalent in other games. I'm not saying that it couldn't be part of your game, and I'm not saying that it isn't part of this game. I'm just simply saying that for me, this isn't necessary. Again, I think there's a lot of people who associate, old school games with grindhouse dungeons, right? With fantasy fucking Vietnam. All right, you enter the dungeon. Oh my God, it's like that scene from what's that fucking movie with Umbrella Corp and Mila Jovovich, Resident Evil, right? Where there's that corridor with the lasers and they're cutting through everybody, and then the one guy dodges it, and then it just becomes a whole grid, and it just barbecues them and cuts them up into cubes. If you've seen the movie, you know what part I'm talking about. But like, I think a lot of people assume like, oh, you're level 1. Oh, you fall down a chute. There's an invisible section of floor and you fall into it. And at the bottom is 5 spinning buzzsaw blades that are man-sized. And it's like, no, I don't think that is the style or the tone that this game is going for, is to kind of kill you and laugh. I mean, you can enjoy a death just because if it's well earned, and even sometimes a little bit sad or tragic. But generally speaking, I feel like Shadowdark doesn't try to I don't know, have that sort of gallows, that super focus on like grimdark gallows humor. So that's one thing about Shadowdark. Second thing is, which Kelsey really talks about here in the game, and I wish I could find it here, like in her thing about GMing. It's about her talking about the importance of light, and basically, I mean, the name is called Shadowdark. And yeah, here we go. Core ethos. So this is the core ethos of, let's bring this up actually. This is the core ethos of Shadowdark. So, time, the most important resource. It must haunt the character's every decision. They don't have time to search every floor tile for a trap. If you've played Dungeon World, or you've watched this show at all, you'll know that one of the things about Dungeon World is not everything is a move. People mistake it. They make all sorts of mistakes with Dungeon World. They make tons of mistakes with PBTA in general. But generally speaking, it's a conversation. And whenever the players look to you and ask, is what in the conversation, that allows you, the GM, to trigger what is called a move. And it's just nomenclature so that we know what we're talking about here. And generally, unless they gave you a golden opportunity, you make what's called a soft move. And this basically is a move that doesn't have immediate consequences. It gives players choices. And, so when to make a move, this is page 164 of your Dungeon World book. When to make a move is when everyone looks to you to find out what happens. So one of the moves is offer an opportunity with them, with or without a cost, or tell them the requirements or consequences and ask. So the reason I bring that up is because in this game, time is a factor. Time measures random encounters. Time measures, and I'm actually going to get to what I consider to be my big revelation. In a minute, has to do with time. Time has to do with random encounters. Time has to do with light running out. Time has to do with food and drink. So if you can attack the time and make time a resource, then that becomes a very critical thing. And the easiest way to do this is to gate dangerous things, either by offering them a choice to make a check that could potentially go bad, or say, essentially, you can spend time. And this is kind of like what D&D 3rd Edition did with Take 20, right? And the basic idea is kind of the same, where it's like, let's say that there's a trap, and it's this, it's a hallway. And again, I like to sort of telegraph traps. It's a room, and it's got all these, crazy, weird cobblestones, and they're all very clearly, pressure plates, and blah, 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 blah. The players basically said, well, can we very carefully take our time and just sort of go over it hop by hop and really do, or, we rig up this, rogue will flip through the other side, and then he's going to rig up some sort of, slack line, and we'll, slide across. You could do all of that. And I'm like, yeah, that's a good idea. That works. And in a lot of games, you might feel like, gee, Derek, you're just giving them a free lunch. Shouldn't people be making checks? Shouldn't you be engaging with them? And the answer is no, they had good ideas. But what that does do is it takes time. And I might say, yeah, that you could do that. You could set up that whole situation. You could set up that big pulley system and get the whole group across. It'll take about an hour or two. An hour or two means an hour or two of torches. It means an hour or two of random encounters. It means that while the cleric is being dragged through the air midway with half the party on one side of the chamber and half the party on the other side of the chamber, that's when the gelatinous cube surges in and attacks them. So time is of utmost importance. I think this is true, by the way, of almost every OSR. That's why I said there's a lot of the Venn diagram here. But darkness. Respect the darkness. It is the true foe. Few things can hold it at bay, and nothing must make those prized tools obsolete. All right? So never make light obsolete is what this is telling me from Shadowdark. Because even in core D&D, to a certain extent, you had, continual light spells, and, you had, whatever. And, you get your light spell in this game, but of course it's a level 1 spell, and it gives you 1 hour duration, 1 hour real time of light. Which again gets into that whole thing about light being kind of weird because it's kind of exists outside of the game in a weird way, and I'm not a big fan of that. Gear, action economy, information, distance, danger, rewarding investment. Honor what has been earned. If a character learns a new language, make it matter. Allow new titles or iconic deeds to have an impact on the character's lives. And stat checks. They succeed automatically what they are trained to do. Only use stat checks when time is a pressure and failure has dire consequences. So there you go. Shadram says, Dark Vision killed a lot of the fun of dungeons for me. In PF2, it feels like everyone gets it. Yeah, absolutely. And rightfully so, right? Because they didn't want that to be a factor that would, make it difficult for you to, go through the adventure. It became about the adventure instead of about the location. So this isn't, so here's what we're actually going to do today. So we're going to sketch out. So there's two ways of designing anything, I think, in the creative RPG fantasy space, as Mark Rosewater always says with Magic the Gathering. And that is 7. There we go. And that is top down. Okay. Or bottom up design. Now, top down means that you start with an idea, a theme. I want to do a dungeon about, the release of a demonic portal. You're starting with a theme. You're starting with an idea. Bottom up design means that you are actually starting with the mechanics. It means that you are starting with the structure of the game, and you will add the flavor and the elements that make up the lore and essentially the lore and the flavor and the substance of your dungeon or design later. So, for my own reasons, I prefer bottom up design. I mean, you'll see me. I'll hop around from time to time and I'll do different things. But for the most part, I actually prefer to start with our dungeon designs from the bottom up. And that means, first and foremost, so what we're going to do here today to try to actually get something done is we are going to outline our initial, let's see if I can use text document, make it a little bit easier. Let's make it large. Okay, so we are going to outline our initial dungeon profile. And if you've never seen a dungeon profile before, it's basically like imagining if you were to look at the dungeon from the side, not top down like you're used to seeing it, but looking at it from the side as if you were to cut the dungeon away from the earth and look at it side on. And this means it's kind of sort of outline our general structure of not the levels themselves, but how the levels connect and interact with each other. And this gets to one of my fundamental beliefs, which is that dungeons are ultimately, they are play spaces. This is a game, and we are playing a game. And I think dungeons can be designed badly or better, I should say. They could be designed better if you treat them like it was a interesting and exciting board game. And that means that there's a lot of interesting choices, different ways to take. Now, a lot of this stuff boils down to people talking about, oh, you should have multiple entrances and exits and all this other stuff. You should. That's all good stuff. But what it really comes down to is when you look at the dungeon, are there choices to be made? Are there different ways that different people can experience and interact with the dungeon to give it sort of a unique feel that makes you feel like, it's yours? Keith says, open pit in the second room. There is a shaft down to the 4th level. Keith, I like what you're thinking. And actually, this is part of I have like sort of some of my go-tos. So to that end, we first have to decide the big question, which is how many levels? Now, I'm a big believer in it's a 10-level game and characters are rated, Shadram, exactly. It's like Mario. There's a lava level, there's an underwater level, but you can get the whistle that'll take you to the warp world, and then you can get 2 whistles, and you can jump right straight to the end of the game. Exactly. So how many levels for our Shadowdark dungeon? Well, Shadowdark is a 10-level game. And generally speaking, I like to think of, I'm going to draw here really quick, but when I think of so if this is a level, let's say this is level 3 of the dungeon, and this is relative monster level. Remember, it doesn't necessarily mean balance, because this game doesn't really have, encounter levels and CRs and all this other stuff. So it's a little bit of a wonky concept. But if you could imagine that means monster level 3 is here, monster level 2 is here, monster level 1 is here, monster level 5, 4, 5, 6. It means it looks something like this, right? most of the threats on level 3 are going to be level 3. But there's still going to be some level 1s and 2s, and there might be some 4, 5s, and 6s. But it's not going to look like, oh, you're on level 3 and, you know, oh my God, all these level 6 monsters are here. Because then it wouldn't be level 3 to me. And the reason why that's so important to me, and yes, this is a gamist conceit. You could try to make it diegetic and you could try to make it simulationist, but for me, it is a gamist conceit. Because ultimately, what I like about the players, or what I like about Megadungeons, is the players know that if the players are level, can I copy that? There we go. If the players are level 3, you got a bunch of level 3 PCs. The players know that the level that they should be on is the 3rd level of the dungeon. But they also know that level 4, this isn't Pathfinder 2, where the math is tight and these monsters are statistically going to just wipe the floor with you. These monsters might as well be unbeatable. You know that level 4 is beatable. Hell, level 5 is beatable. The danger is greater. You may not have, there might be some monsters there that maybe are out of your league or have strange abilities that you don't have anything that you don't know how to deal with. But you also know that the treasure is greater and more powerful. And remember, in this game, the treasure that you're getting could be in the form of gold, but it could also be in the form of magic items, but it could also be in the form of, strange powers and abilities. We've talked about magical fountains and stuff like that. What if I told you that there was a magic fountain? Maybe the group found a map and it's on level 5 of the dungeon, and you roll 1d6 when you drink from it. Or better yet, you roll 1d8. And on a 1, it raises your strength to 18. And on a 2, it raises your dex to 18. And so on and so forth. And all the way to a 6. And if you roll a 7, it raises all of your stats to 18. And if you roll an 8, it kills you. What if you're a level 3 party and you found about a secret stairway that leads down to level 5, and you kind of know how to get to that place? Do you guys want to go to that tonight? Does that sound cool? Do you guys want to try it? I don't think we could beat the level 5 monsters. It's cool. I'll take a bunch of invisibility spells. You've got that Cloak of Elven kind. What if we just sneak in? No one will be the wiser. We don't have to fight anything. I just want to go drink from that frickin' potion or that fountain, and I want to see what stat I can get to 18. And of course, every player, of course, in the history of D&D would be thinking, I'm going to roll that 7 and get straight 18s. You know that. No one ever thinks that they're going to roll the 8. The players can choose to put themselves in that danger zone. Or maybe last session, a couple players died. So you got 2 characters that are level 1, brand new characters, and you got 3 people who are level 3. And the group goes, let's just go to level 2 tonight. It won't be too hard for the level 1s. It'll be easier for us. Or, hey, you know what? Maybe Carrie couldn't make it tonight, so let's just tackle level 2 because we're down a party member. Or you show up and no one else shows up, and it's just you solo, and you say, you know what? I'm going to go to level 1 and just kick ass. It's been a rough week. There's only one of us. There's only 2 of us. Let's just go to level 1. It puts all of the choices in the player's control, and they roughly know what those danger levels are, right? So it's not like they're just like, oh, I'm going to go to level 1, and then I'm like, okay, 5 Baylors attack you, and you're dead. And you're like, see, that took away for me the agency component of the dungeon. So it's important to me. So my initial instinct is to say, oh, Sean, we had a super chat. Sorry. Now I am thinking we need a princess to rescue. I'm sorry, Sir Marion. The princess is not on a level. No princesses to rescue. So my thought process here is there's 10 levels to Shadowdark. There should be 10 or 11. And the reason why I say or 11 is like maybe there's like the secret ultimate boss level where, you know, no holds bar. It's just, you know, the hardest thing that the dungeon has to offer. And you kind of offer it as sort of a special sub bonus. But we'll play around with this idea. All right. So we're going to start here. We're going to assume for right now. Oh, yes. The hidden boss is an addition to the final boss. Yes. Let me be very clear about this. In the trope of modern JRPGs, right? The final boss is like Sephiroth, but like the mega ultimate boss is like Emerald Weapon, right? Like there's always a tougher, bigger, meaner thing here. So let's just say for right now, we'll say 10. Just to make this easier. So, okay, we've got, this is the ground. Okay, this is right. This is outside. And then we start thinking about our dungeons. So obviously we have level 1. Now, level 1 is going to be accessed from the surface, obviously. So let's add, so I'm just imagining in a class, this is again, this is very, you know, simple and prosaic. There's some kind of ruined fortress, temple, castle, something, right? That is on the surface. And from that, we have a entrance from the level down. That is terrible. Let me change that up. Let's go with a thick line. Okay. So we have an entrance from the opening. I'm going to zoom in a little bit here just to make it a little bit bigger. And this is, in my opinion, what I would call the commonly known entrance. Like this might be the thing that like most people in town know about and is commonly used to access the dungeon. However, it's always a good idea to put in another entrance as well, at least one. And maybe this is another entrance that isn't as well known. And this is something the players could discover, the players could learn about. And it doesn't necessarily lead to something better or more dangerous or less dangerous, but it's different. And it gives them different ways to access the same dungeon. Okay? Now, let's start sketching out. And again, we'll add other things as going on. I'm just kind of pointing out like the general thought process around here. So now let's add level 2. Now, one of the things that we're going to generally do here is we are going to sort of use, so again, this is like a side view, right? If the dungeon was flat, you know, if you were cutting through the mountain or the earth and looking at it. So one of the things is, and I could be wrong here, but I'm just imagining like not that we are necessarily going to do this, but I'm just imagining like a Kickstarter or trying to sell it. I like the idea of there being probably like 500 rooms, or maybe something like around that nature, or maybe 400 rooms. 500 is a nice number, but just because it's a nice round number. So one of the things that we want to think about is how many rooms, encounters do we want on each level? And one of the things I actually like having is for levels to have different sizes and different scopes. So one of the things that I always really like to do is to make level 2 one of the larger levels of the game. Cal coming in with $5. Hey, Cal. Plot twist. Level 1 is just the basement of some Duke's castle and a theme park when someone accidentally opens the door level 2, kicking off the game. You know, if you wanted to go for something a little bit more jokey and fun, I would be 100% about that. I mean, I think one of the first dungeons that like my buddy Justin made when we were like in junior high was like the entrance to the dungeon was like under the king's bed or something. And it was like, wait, that would be a terrible place for the dungeon. So level 2 is a bigger level. And of course, what really defines a level, by the way, remember, is not just the difficulty level, but there's also going to be a theme and idea. And again, one of the things that we'll talk about is how, themes and factions and all this other stuff. But right now, we're just thinking about the structure and how we're going to play this. All right. So level 2 is a big level. And then for level 3, so we'll talk about connections too, but one of the things that I also like to do is, especially for what I'll call the surface levels, the ones that are closer to the surface, is to give players access to some of those levels straight away. So the way that they might gain this access straight away is maybe there is not necessarily near the common ruins, but maybe there's some sort of nearby tower. And I'm just using this tower as like a stand-in. It could be any kind of structure, but it's not necessarily ruined. It's just, it's known to be sort of connected or related or somehow, otherwise tied to the dungeon. And so for me, part of the idea here is that we could have a entrance to... Interesting. We could have an entrance from the second level or from the surface down to level 2. And again, we'll talk about other options and ideas as well. I'm just kind of exploring, giving you this idea. Now, remember too, this entrance might not be as well known about. So it might be something that the players have to earn or extend. Like what if this is occupied? Maybe there's a mage or something that lives in this tower, and we'll let you use his personal entrance into the dungeon, but you have to only when you do favors for him or something like that. So you have to be like on a wizard quest or something like that. And it just gives you another way to access the dungeon. And we'll talk about danger gradients too at some point. But, one of the ideas that I like to assess is that like, even though level 2 is level 2, right? Like it might be kind of like easier over here and easier over here. And then like in the quote unquote middle of the level, it's more dangerous. And so getting access to this side of the danger gradient has value because that way you don't have to go through this dangerous area or this problematic area to get to where you want to go. And learning the dungeon. And again, if you never grew up playing like, I'm biased. I'm not just biased, but I'm a product of what I grew up learning. And like I grew up playing games like EverQuest, and the big dungeons of EverQuest. These were not instances; they were zones, and places like Gook, Upper Gook, Lower Gook, kind of defined what how I think about dungeon is that perspective. Is designing center out possible? What if you made sure to balance the two portions as you went through construction? Possible, flawed, pointless? Logan, can you describe? I don't actually quite know what you mean there, so maybe can you restate that, repurpose that? Not that I don't want to answer it, I just don't understand. Now, so again, I'm just kind of spitballing and throwing up ideas here. So for level 3, we're going to do something a little new, which is we're going to split level 3. So there's basically going to be 2 sides to level 3 that aren't necessarily connected to one another. They may be somewhat tied thematically, but they might be more like a yin-yang thing or have different ideas. The key thing here is that there is going to be different threats in A that is different threats than B, but that going through one may not necessarily lead you to the other. Now, also remember, in this version of the game, it only goes to 10. So, level 3 is like the equivalent of like level, 7 in a standard 1 to 20 D&D or 6. Right? It's dangerous. It's starting to get dangerous. And I will fully admit this. This is again, for me, you know, I'm a product of my influence as well. And I grew up, you know, with, you know, Castle Greyhawk and Undermountain and Rapanathuk. And I'm going to just draw a well here, but it doesn't necessarily have to be a literal well. But the idea here is that there is a known entrance to the dungeon that goes basically to straight down to a relatively dangerous part of the dungeon. And much like our entrance here, this entrance is sort of well known in a sense of like, this is like the express elevator to hell. And maybe even from a danger gradient perspective, level 3A, okay, is tougher. Even as I say that, I kind of want to just start changing this. I don't like that I typed it out. Level 3A, what the hell is that symbol? Level 3A might be tougher into a certain extent than level 3B. And if you've ever played Rapanathuk, which maybe you haven't, is that there's a saying which is, you know, they're like, oh, Rapanathuk is blah, blah, but whatever you do, don't go down the well. And that's, you know, Smith and I will routinely refer to these things as wells, even if they aren't literally wells. Shadram, exactly. Don't go down the well. Exactly. But I refer to them as wells, even if they aren't quite literally wells. But it's a dangerous entrance, not just a simple stairway. It's, you know, it's literally usually some sort of descent. The party has to climb down or fly down. But this is giving the player the option to just jump straight down to a lower level of the dungeon is immediately showing the party the ball is in your court. You have choices here. You have decisions here. If you go to level 3A right off the bat, you'll probably die. But if you don't, oh, the treasure, the gold, the weird, powerful items, right? You know, I'm not saying that part of my job is, I mean, again, I'm kind of unbiased, but you know, there's an element of me where I'm like, oh, are you going to go? You know, like I'm kind of like, you know, like teasing them and like, you know, you should go. So any case, and we'll draw the connections between all the levels and stuff too later. I just kind of pointing out that the first couple of levels here, we are experiencing different choices the party could make. One party might never go to level 3B. They might go to level 3A. Also, one of the reasons why level 2 is bigger than level 1 is because level 2 gives us more breadth. Level 1 is always a very tough level because you don't have it doesn't go lower than 1. You know, when you're level 2, you have that range of like, oh, you can fight something 1 to 3. But when you're level 1, it's kind of tough. So level 1 typically is more of it's kind of more of an introduction to the dungeon. And then like for me, like the dungeon properly starts at level 2. You know, you can almost think of it as a training wheel level. So next we're going to go for level 4. And I have something interesting that I want to do with level 4 as well. Now, level 4 is larger than 1, but it's not as large as 2. 2 is kind of a big level. And then we'll go to level 5. Now, level 5 is going to be our first sort of like, you know, this is the halfway point of the dungeon. So I view level 5 as being another, you know, big level that really defines, you know, certain. It's going to be like maybe one of the, in fact, if you want to think of it this way, like the sub boss of the dungeon might be on level 5. You might think that every level literally has a boss that is more difficult than the level, after it. So like level 5, and then it's like, oh, well, the level 6 has a even scarier monster, and level 7 has an even scarier monster, and level 8 has a level scarier monster, level 9. No, not necessarily. Level 5 might actually have the second or third most powerful creature, in the game. For lack, I know I'm just totally spitballing here, because remember, this is a bottom-up design. We are just deciding mechanics. We're not focused on leather. Maybe on level 10 or level 11, to our point, maybe level 10, the normal end of the game, right? Big dragon, right? That's the boss of the dungeon, if you really want to call it that way. If you played through this game and you played it for, a year or so or more, and you characters got up to level 9 and 10, and you went down to level 10, you beat the dragon, cool. You beat the game. Well, that dragon on level 10 might be the big boss of the dungeon, but level 5 might have, the Beholder King. And the Beholder King is, by all accounts, maybe the second or third or fourth most, very powerful creature in the game. And I do this for a couple of reasons. One, to highlight that it's not just about getting to the bottom and killing the boss. There is no point to this. The second, there's no the princess is another castle. You don't have to beat level 1, have to beat level 2, have to beat level 3, have to beat level 4, you could skip it. There might be a group of people who never fight the dragon. And that's okay, because maybe they caught beef with the Beholder King early and they made it their mission to take him out. And sure, maybe they didn't even make it to level 10 and the quote unquote end of the game. The group went to level 5. They went to level 6. Maybe they leveled up to level 7 or 8. They got some magic powers and they decided to go take out the Beholder King. They beat him and everybody agreed that would be a cool end to the campaign. It's not the end of this world. The world continues on, and maybe the dungeon continues on for 1,000 years or more. But for that story, for that campaign, for that player group, that was a cool enough story to tell. And it gives you gives you an early out, because 10 levels of dungeon or 20 levels of dungeon or 15 levels of dungeon is a lot. I'm not saying that 5 isn't, but I think that's why it's important to have these kind of like pressure relief valves. And spoiler alert, there's going to be one of these on level 2 as well, although it's going to be like considerably weaker. Because some campaigns are going to start, the players are going to get to levels 1, 2, 3, maybe they get to level 3 or 4, and you get through level 1 and 2, maybe they dally on level 3 a little bit, and then they beat this cool monster on level 2, and everybody goes, that was fun. I had fun with that. We played for, 20 or less sessions, but I'm ready to do something else. But you get that satisfaction. You get the satisfaction of going, but hey, it's not like, oh, but because in an adventure path, every monster inexorably serves the monster in the next adventure, which serves the monster in the next adventure, which serves ultimately the big bad evil guy. The idea here is that this isn't how this works. This isn't monolithic evil, right? The force that rules level 5 and maybe arguably rules the top half of the dungeon in name, if not in reality, isn't serving or in cahoots with our ultimate level 10 monster. They have their own agenda. They have their own ideas. And so I think that's why it's important to give these kind of natural stopping off points, because sometimes that's going to be where your campaign ends. And I think it's important to design around that idea. But make no mistake about it. Level 5 is going to be an important level. It's going to have, you could argue it's going to be the first climax of our adventure. You thought that the well said that the 3A said level 14. Oh, well, that would be a bit extreme. I will say, Kelsey is a sadistic fuck, because just in this bestiary, remember, this is a game that goes to level 10. The 10-eyed oracle, which I presume is this character here on the cover of the book, is level 18. But, and this is what I love about this, level 18 monster, but its AC is 17, and its hit points is 85. And it reminds me of the original monster manual from D&D and the original deities and demigods, and Loth, the demon queen of the abyss, of the spiderweb pits. She had 66 hit points. And I think her AC was like -2 or something, or -1, which would be equivalent of like AC 21. That was Loth. That was the demon queen of the abyss, of the demon wet pits, rather. Spider queen of the demon wet pits, whatever. Ikemos. So the level boss is never a skill gate. You never hide the next level down behind one. It's always something they choose to engage with. Absolutely, Ikemos. Absolutely. If anything, I mean, let's be clear with ourselves. The boss should give some sort of treasure. And maybe sometimes that treasure is access. I'm not saying that might not be access, but it will never be that you have to beat the boss to get to the next level. In fact, just the opposite. In fact, I want people to get to level 5 and go, we are never fucking with that Beholder King ever, because fuck, that's crazy. And then they just proceed with the rest of their life. And in your heart of hearts that there's this lurking threat. One of the core conceits of a dungeon, of a mega dungeon, is that unless you're willing to play it for years and years and years and years, the players will never clear out every single level. They might clear out part of level 1, and then they decide to go to level 2, and they're on level 2 for a while, and then they go to level 3B, and you know what? They like level 3B so much, it's a lot of fun, and maybe level 3B is like a very undead themed level. It's like this tomb crypt thing that's ruled over by like a mummy lord, and maybe the party's got like a cleric and a paladin, and like they found like a cool holy weapon, so they just say, you know what, this is fun for us, we're kicking ass, we're gonna go here. And then they go to level 4, but they level up here. Like they level up here all the way to level 5. When they get to level 4, they're only on level 4 as long as it takes them to find the stairs to level 5. And then they start going to level 5. And, they basically skipped almost all of level 4, all of level 3A. They skipped a good part of level 2. And that's okay. That's the story of your game. And I think that's important to note there. Heyo, Whoople, mind blown, coming in with some super chats. Kefka's going off here. Mind blown, $5 says, can we have the monsters on 5 be hinted at through the top levels, like sealed tunnels with holy magic poems begging people to beware the beast? Mind blown, we would be doing ourselves a disservice. To my team, no, I was trying to quote Will Ferrell there. I would be doing myself a disservice and this whole band if I didn't play the hell out of this instrument. One of the coolest things to do with these monsters is to foreshadow them. There's something to be said. Let me just write this down. And this is one of my philosophies that I use a lot when I'm designing big dungeons, which is this. Which is expect, not predict. And what that means is I want my players to be expecting something to happen, but I don't necessarily want them to be able to like have it mathed out and to necessarily be able to like predict exactly what it is, exactly what its powers are, and exactly what it does. But I also don't want them to be completely surprised that there is some super powerful entity or force on level 5, because I still want there to be a moment of surprise, but I don't want it to be something that is completely out of the blue. So foreshadowing in that way is I think really, really important. And so I really try to set up expectations more than predictions. Like it would never really, now the players might be able to put 2 and 2 together and figure out something about it, which is fine. But if that's earlier on, I really want to just tease them and I want to go to that. So I'm a big fan of that. Whoopelstein, thank you for the massive super chat. Got to find the boss key, the map, and the compass so that you know where you are and where the boss is on each floor. You joke, but who doesn't love Zelda? I'm not saying that we would literally have a boss key or the big key, or that we would literally have a map and we literally have a compass. But and I'm talking to you, that you have never played in a mega dungeon or a big dungeon. If you've always wondered, what is the value of getting a map or part of a map? And it's because if you're playing a 5-room dungeon or a 10-room dungeon, what is the purpose of a map or the value of a map? There is none. There isn't. So, I think that having that kind of information, we talked about, Kelsey talked about time and darkness and gear, but she also talked about information, and she talks about dispensing it freely. And, if they test the floor for a trap and then they find it, to play like pixel bitching with them, which is fine, but also just knowledge is power in a dungeon. And I am let me be very clear about this. I am completely okay with the players learning about some room on level 3B, okay, which is like, it's on fire and it's guarded by 4 fire elementals. Okay, but they're guarding a flaming sword, a flame tongue, a powerful flaming sword or weapon that's really cool. And the party goes, all right, let's prep for that. Let's go find fire resistance gear or fire immunity gear or get spells that help us out in this situation. And they go into that encounter well prepared. And it's a joke. It's easy. And that's kind of anathema to the way that a lot of modern games think, which is, no, every fight, every encounter has to be nail biter, tactical. And if it's a joke, then you're not satisfying the players and people are going to walk away angry. In my experience, that is so far from the truth in this kind of environment, because it's about not combat as war. It's about campaign as war. I guess a campaign is war, because it's about using your knowledge and putting a plan together and attacking the problem and getting solutions. Bad GM. Psych, it's ice fire. Now, look, there is something to be said about this, okay? Because there is an element here. All right, side tangent. There is an element here where it could be fun a little bit to fuck with your players. All right, so this one time, the party was going to this dungeon and they were hearing all these rumors, or, they were talking, the people were discussing and the legends and the rumors about this white dragon. And so the group was like, okay, white dragon, stuff like that. And people talked about the unnatural chill in that part of the valley and whatever it was. And so the group goes, okay, white dragon, unnatural chill. Cool. So they load up with, protection from elements, cold, and resist energy, cold spells. And they get there, and it was not a white dragon. It was a white dragon. And actually used to be red. Now it's just an undead. It was now an undead dragon that also drained at negative energy levels when it hits you. So, look, sometimes it's fun to be evil GM. I mean, I'm just saying, sometimes it is. I don't know that I would recommend that you do this with people who aren't like your lifelong friends. But just saying. Yeah, Iron Chestnut. That is awesome. That's a great example. The one-eyed master. I want players, not just the characters. I want the players to think about that and be like, what do we know about? Oh yeah, it could be. Someone's like, what if it's a beholder? Like, no way, it's a beholder. That's too high level. It could be a cyclops. Okay, cool. Like, I think that's awesome. That's that's actually a fantastic example of that, and I love that because it gets the players thinking and talking. And one of the things that I know, one of my barometers of whether my campaign is going well. And this, I'll be honest with you, this has been more true in Mega Dungeon campaigns than in any other type of campaign I've ever run, ever, are my players talking, hatching plans, and discussing things about my game offline between sessions. They might be online, but you know what I mean? They're not at the session. I think a lot of people treat their D&D games like watching a series on Netflix. You turn it on, you watch an episode or 2 or 3, you turn it off, you go back to your daily life, you forget about it, you don't think about it, and then you turn it back on. Now, there's some people who watch a show, like when I used to watch Lost, I was one of those people, we'd sit there, we'd talk about Lost, and like we were trying to figure it out and all this other stuff. We were really engaged with it. And ultimately betrayed by what I feel is a terrible ending of that show. But for me, when my players are treating a RPG campaign the way that me and my friends used to treat watching Lost as a whole life encompassing thing, that is where I think you really get some really cool moments. And I want players to be discussing before the session starts, you know, like, what do we think we're going to do? Now, as a GM, you know, you can be honest with them. You don't always have, you know, in theory, one of the things that's advantage of, you know, buying something like, you know, Tolos or what is it called? Repenathuk or Undermount or Barrow Maze or whatever, is that it's all written out beforehand. So you don't really have to do much, but maybe you do have to do a little bit of prep. But like, you know, as a GM, you might just say, oh, you know, hey, you know, level 4 is not accessible yet, even if you find the stairs, because I haven't made it yet. Like, that's fine. Like, you can be honest with your party members and players. But like, if they're talking about what their plan is for the next session, that's awesome. You know, and the group's like, we never did go back and explore that one passage that had that like weird symbol or rune. And then I was like, oh yeah, we should totally do that. Like, that's cool stuff. I really think it is. You've already got players. I mean, look, it's up to them. It's on them. Now, here's where I think the game of like Shadowdark and old school D&D really, really works well, which is if we look at okay, if we look at the Shadowdark rules here, you can see that a bag of gold, a gem, a fine piece of armor, a magic scroll is worth 1 XP. And on level 1 or 2 of your dungeon, there may be lots of gold and gems and fine armor. And the players are going to earn lots of 1 XP, 1 XP, 1 XP, 1 XP, 1 XP. And that was great when they were level 1 and they only needed 10 XP to level up. Or maybe when they were level 2 and they only needed 20 XP to level up. But if your party insists on staying on level 1 and they're now level 2 and they need 20 XP or 30 XP to get to the next level, and the treasure they're finding is quote unquote boring because it's just, you know, gold and treasure. They want cooler stuff and it's going to take them forever. I think if they're okay with that, then that's fine. They have decided that what makes this game fun for them is they don't want to be challenged. They want to complete. That's okay. It's not your job to tell your players what's fun. The dungeon is there that if the group goes, we're sick of this. We're bored. We're level 3. Fuck it. We go down the well. I want to go find some fabulous treasure or some legendary treasure. Also, while I totally like this thing, they definitely need like something between fabulous and legendary, something worth like 5 XP or something. But you know, like that's, you know, very, very cool. And I think that the players will, if they get bored, then they'll go jump down the well, they'll go to the lower level and they'll start trying to find cooler magical items and they'll start trying to find stuff that's going to give them more experience points. If they're fine doing the slow, inexorable, inevitable grind, then, you know, more power to them. That's okay. That's they've decided that's what's fun. Dan says, disagree. Most players do not know what makes the game fun for them. Well, they may not necessarily know it consciously, Dan, but they know it subconsciously. I mean, players are going to know whether they're having fun or not, and they're going to find that they are attracted to options and opportunities that align with what makes that fun for them. So we got level 5. So I just want to kind of keep going here. All right. So next, we're going to go to level 6 next. Now, after, so, you know, there's a textural element as here as well, which is sometimes a level may not necessarily be, you know, having a short level after, say, a very long level can also be very rewarding because, you know, you just went through a big, long level and it may be very, very frustrating if you have to go to another level right away, right? And by the way, I should just note, we are going to move these levels around eventually. Let's see here. Sean, $5 says, notice on the page for awarding XP, sources of XP is more than just treasure and magic items. Yeah, Sean. So you can see here that it is they earn XP from valuable treasures and boons. These do not need to reflect monetary value. Boons or fabled items have intangible worth. So gold and gems, oaths, secrets, blessings, magical items, meaningful trophies, and clever thinking. And I think that's great because one of the things that I did when I ran my Pathfinder Megadungeon is I awarded XP for lore, for figuring out the secrets of the dungeon. And I think that that is awesome because remember, as I always say on this channel, what gets rewarded gets repeated. Reward with XP the stuff that you want your players to be excited about. And if you know that your players are excited about X, Y, and Z, then that's what you should be rewarding as well. All right, so we're going to go level 6 here. We're going to go level 7. Make that one a little bit bigger. For level 8, I think we're going to do a split level again because we haven't had one of those in a while, and that's fun to do. Because like now we're getting down to the end game, right? We're getting down to the very end of the game. Sean says 4 small levels connected by underground rivers, or 3 small levels, 6A, 6B, 6C, each with different themes, and 3 staircases leading there from the same levels. So you do need to be careful because we really haven't talked here about, though, is the idea of a sub level. And a sub level is this idea of a level that basically just connects to one level of the dungeon. It's sort of like an accessed area. I think that if you split things up too much, it can kind of lead to a certain amount of confusion. I don't think it's necessarily a bad idea, so I actually don't hate that idea of 6 different levels or of 3 smaller different levels. But so we might totally end up doing that. I'm just saying that I find that 2 has always worked well for me. 3 can be a little bit tricksy. All right. And then we get level 9, and I want level 9 to be another big, long level. Believe it or not, I don't want the final level to be that long. I don't know if I want it to be as long as level 5. We'll make it a little bit shorter. But level 9 is sort of like your final opportunity to grind and level up and get the cool, big, awesome, powerful stuff that you need to get to level 10. And, of course, by the time you get to level 10, your characters will be at level 10 or near level 10, which is sort of, quote-unquote, the end of the game. So there's no more, game-based progression for you to deal with. And so, at a certain extent, level 10 is sort of more of a challenge level rather than an actual level to explore and grind up. Mind blown. How much to add in a secret floor that's just an interdimensional tap room or bowling alley with a multi-floor elevator? $5. So this is, we haven't talked about theme because we've mostly been talking about simply about the mechanics of the game here. Theme is very important. For me personally, for my tastes, I tend not to do stuff like this. The jokey, super funhouse style of dungeons. That being said, as I've said before, as you go lower in a dungeon, right, things get more magical. They get weirder. They get older. They get stranger. And so while I think having something like an interdimensional tap room on levels 1, 2, and 3 is very faux pas, strangely enough, I actually don't mind it as much in the bottom levels of the game because that's where things for me can get weird because the magic, the weirdness, the old, this is where, do I want there to be an anti-gravity trap on level 1 or 2 of my dungeon? Absolutely not. Do I want to have a, living black hole trap in level 9 of my dungeon? Absolutely, yes. So that's where I think that the game sort of scales up and can feel different in that respect. But I caution people to not, to not pull the trigger too early. Has a theme been decided yet? Absolutely not. No, this is strictly mechanical. This is just talking about how we want to outlay the levels. So we've made a couple of decisions about how things would be connected together already. So let's put in some more. So, so we talked about how right now level 1 can be accessed from 2 spots in the ruins above the city or above the dungeon. And then obviously level 1 needs to connect to level 2. So let's put a connection over here. Now, where these things are doesn't necessarily mean anything. I'm actually going to use a thicker line weight here. But, you know, the idea here is that there's some concept between the distance between this relatively means something. Now, one thing that I really want to do, and somebody mentioned this already, so I'm a big fan of this, is I love the idea of having some sort of dungeon entrance that goes from level 1 to level 2 straight to level 3B. So when you find this exit entrance to level 2, you also have found an entrance down to level 3B. I think that could be very cool and exciting. So obviously we need to get from level 2 to level 3A as well. And now some of these entrances, and we're not being super precise here, some of these entrances might be secret. Some of these entrances might be well known. Some of these entrances might be locked or unavailable, and they might have to be unlocked. So just because it's here doesn't necessarily mean that it's completely available. Now, this is going to be very strange. Shadram, there's a lot to like about Abomination Vaults. And while I really like the first 4 levels, the second module, which covers levels 5, 6, and 7, had that great central stair concept. Loved it. Now, it's not as appealing in Pathfinder 2 because of the idea of, the levels mean so much and the math is so tight. But fundamentally, I absolutely loved that central stair concept from the middle adventure for levels 5, 6, and 7. Big fan of that. Now, level 4 is going to be interesting. Now, one of the things we haven't discussed yet, which we will discuss, we'll use a different color of this, is, and it'll probably stop at level 4. Level 5 will be the first level that will not be accessible from the surface. All right. So obviously level 1 is accessible from the surface. Level 2 is accessible from the surface via the tower. Level 3A is accessible to the surface via the well. But we may also have some entrances to, let's say, level 4, and I'm going to use green here, that represent some sort of underground, connection that, off, if you will, off stage, links in to the dungeon, right? So I'm a big fan of that, because when they're this close to the surface, there might be, maybe it's an ancient underground river or a cave system, or there's different ways that you can access it. But part of what makes level 5 feel like a gateway into the next level or the next part of the dungeon is that level 5 is no longer accessible from the upper levels or from the surface. So in some capacity, we might have these entrances here, these green ones, that aren't necessarily part of the quote unquote dungeon, but go into the, things here. Yeah, you got to have passed to the Underdark with road cones and stop saying beyond the scope of this adventure. Yes. Yeah, there are holes that Pathfinder points to and says this path leads to an area in the Darklands that are outside the scope of this adventure. Yes, exactly. Well, no, but in this case, this is not random. Let me actually be very clear about this here. This is not This is not something that would say this goes outside the scope of the adventure. I'm saying that if we were to design this, right, I would eventually, describe how this connects up to, I don't know, someone was joking that like level 4 maybe was like the water level, right? So maybe level 4 is part of some underground lake and it eventually leads up to the surface where there's some sort of, calm, tranquil pond, but unbeknownst to the population, if you swim down and you have the ability to breathe water, you can find an ancient secret tunnel which leads you all the way to level 4. That's what I'm talking about when I talk about like these things. It's not just like, oh, it goes off into the Shadowdark and it's never seen again. It's these would be legitimate entrances and exits to the dungeon. So now for level 4, I'm going to do something a little bit unusual, which is that level 4, I'm going to have accessible from level 2, but it's not actually going to be accessible from levels 3. So level 3A is going to attach to level 5, and level 3B is going to attach to level 5. And level 5 is going to attach to 4, but 4 is not going to attach to 3. And again, it's just about providing texture. Do you see how we are creating pathways that aren't necessarily linear? We're creating loops. We're creating different ways of accessing things. It's not as simple as just going 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You can't do that. You can go 1, 2, 4, 5, 3. You can go 1, 2, 3A, 5, 4, back down to 5, up to 3B, up to 1, down to 2. But you just can't just go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? It breaks it up. It forces you to sort of do things at a different perspective. Also, you can see here that the larger levels, like 2 and 5, have a lot of entrances and exits. And that makes sense. It's going to be bigger real estate and should have more of these entrances and exits as well. What's up, Steven? We are starting. We are. Hold a sec. Do I have it? We got to find it. Hold on. There we go. This is Project Shadowdeep. Dun, dun, dun. It's creating a mega dungeon in Shadowdark. Is it supposed to be impossible to go from 3 to 4? Yes, OED. I do not. I want players to be forced to have to, if they want to go to level 4 with 4 going to level 5, then they need to find it. Cool. See, Steven never stops hustling. I'm sitting here just talking about making a mega dungeon, and he's already just like, oh, cool, I can publish it. All right, Steve, we'll talk. We'll talk at Gen Con. Maybe it'll be done. I don't want it to be predictable, right? I want you to I want it to expect. I expect there to be a level 4, but I cannot predict that I'm just going to be able to go straight to level 4 from level 3. And that's where, again, we kind of shake things up a little bit. All right, so now let's take level 6 and let's bring level 6, because we had our well. Our well allowed us to jump from the surface all the way down to level 3. We haven't had one of those in a while. So what we're going to do with levels 6 and 7 is we're going to kind of skew them a little bit. Now, I want 6 and 7. I don't know. Maybe they don't touch. I don't know. Well, we'll play around with this idea. This is where chat can help me out. But I like the idea that 3B can connect down to 6, and that 3A can connect down to 7. And this is the idea that we don't have to worry about balance. Oh my God, what if you're telling me that a level 1 party could go down the well? And by the way, this is located here in space, but these don't necessarily have to be like next to each other. That's what this dotted line represented. You're telling me a level 1 party could go down to level 3A and find some entrance to level 7 and just be down on level 7? And I'm like, yeah, they could. Sounds awesome to me. And maybe this is hidden. We said about this before, maybe this entrance is is hidden by illusion, and maybe you need a secret key, maybe it's a riddle, maybe it's something like that. I mean, there's different options to be seen there, but I definitely want there to be some, a lot more texture to that. So 5 will go to 7. 5 will go to 6. I don't know. What do you guys think? Should 6 connect to 7? Maybe yes, maybe no. Maybe we have it so that like 6 connects, just to kind of make it weirder here. 6 connects to 8B and 8A, but 7 only connects to A and 9. And these both connect to 9. 6 is afraid of 7. Yeah. Because 6, 8, 7 or whatever. What is it? 6, 8, 9. Shadowdark says, I like the idea of level 7 being visible from various areas below 6. Ooh, yeah. 7, 8, 9. Thank you, Shadowdark. I like the idea of level 7 being visible from various areas below 6. You could drop down at any point, like natural caves with frequent holes between. I actually love that idea as well, Shadram. Actually, I think that idea is really cool. In fact, it's funny that you mentioned that, Shadram. It's really funny that you mentioned that. Give me a minute here. I got to do a quick Google search. Final Fantasy 4. I was watching a replay of Final Fantasy 4. That's Final Fantasy 2 in the US. And the character, there's a dungeon, right, where you go through the underwater waterways, and I'm trying to find a really good screenshot. Instead, like, it's, we live in the era of the internet, so it's all like 3D. I'm looking for like the original one. But like, I guess this is kind of the closest we're going to get to it. But like when you get to a certain part of the dungeon, like you can see the lower part of the next level that's like below you. And I was just like, that is so cool and so underutilized in like modern RPG design. And I thought that was so cool. Another place where it does it is like the Land of Summon Monsters. I remember that. Land of Summon Monsters. So like when you're walking around like the Land of Summon Monsters in the game, like you can see the level below you, and like you can kind of start to like learn stuff about it. So I actually think that's kind of a really cool idea. Maybe a magically frozen cave where you can kind of only see through the ice floor. Your torch protects you from the cold. Yeah, I mean, foreshadowing is incredibly important. And actually, I'm gonna highlight something. I'm gonna actually tell you something. And literally, I mean, it's hard for me not just to steal it. So we'll kind of get this. Elden Ring does this all the time. That's awesome. Yeah, I haven't played Elden Ring, but it's pretty cool. One of my favorite things that Dragon's Delve had was there was this magical shaft, and it was a clear glass, but it was like indestructible. And first floor, you see this clear shaft, and you can, it's like a glass column. It's fairly, it's like 10 feet across. And you go down to level 2, and you can see the glass column, and you can kind of start to figure out where this glass column goes through the levels. It goes through levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And at some points, there's a random chance that when you're on levels 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, you could see basically a beholder floats up and down this shaft. It's almost like it's keeping an eye on the upper levels of the dungeon. And then when you get to level 10, you go to that area where you expect the glass column to be, the glass pillar, the glass tube, I guess, the shaft. And instead of a glass shaft, you see the entrance to it in the ceiling. And you realize that you are now on the level of the beholder. And I think that's so cool. Now, while I wouldn't want to like straight up copy that, the idea of it, I think, is awesome. When you talk about foreshadowing and, so again, you expect there to be this thing, but you can't predict when suddenly this elevator kind of shaft thing will suddenly end, and suddenly you're face to face with this monster that you've been sort of being teased with for the entire game. So I'm a little bit worried that 8B is kind of boring. because it kind of just like, it kind of just comes in and leaves. But, anyways, but we can adjust with that. And then level 9 will have 2 entrances to 10. Because at this point, remember, branching paths are good, but at the end of the day, well, Sean, one of the things is, again, imagining like, as a GM, I like the idea of draw maps, leave blanks. And this is true even with Mega Dungeons, because if I was really drawing this, this was like really for my campaign, I would not be like, hey guys, we can't start playing until I've drawn all 10 levels of the dungeon. But I would want to have some idea of what was on these lower levels, because I would want to start to be able to sort of very vaguely hint at them fairly early on. But what sub-levels let you do is they kind of let you draw maps, leave blanks. Sub-levels are a great place to put blanks, because you could have a part of your dungeon that ordinarily was just a hallway, and boom, you just add an extra little, you get a cool idea, or a player mentions something that you think would be cool, and you just add a little, T section to that hallway, and now it's a stairs that go down to a sub-level, and you can kind of build a mini dungeon. It's almost like an instance in like MMO, nomenclature. It's like an instance within your dungeon, right? So you design level 2, and you have some really cool ideas about level 2, but then you get, you're inspired for something, and you're just like, cool, let me just make this little thing over here, this little mini dungeon, this sub-level. And again, the idea of a sub-level is it's a sub-level of 6. So the power level is roughly equivalent to 6, but it has its own theme. It's its own unique thing, and it doesn't necessarily tie in with the other parts of the dungeon. Very rarely you might have it connect to another part of the dungeon, but that is the exception rather than the rule. Generally speaking, sub-levels kind of exist on their own thing. And that's kind of where I think of in that respect. But, there might be something we could do with 8B here as well. Lugs, I kind of like the idea of level 4 not being accessible by level 5. Level 4 should be missable by the players. Then level 5 can be cut in half, and the players must backtrack to fully clear it. I don't know. I mean, I think making the choice to go up to level 4 is already kind of an interesting choice. I don't want that, literally to be only accessible from this upper level. And then, because here's the thing, if the level doesn't connect further down, Lugs, it doesn't have to necessarily connect to the next level, but it does have to connect further down in some capacity, then it's not a level, it's a sub level. Does that make sense? That's kind of what makes it a sub level. So if we took if level 4 was just this, oh my God, what is happening? If level 4 was just this, then it's a sub level. Okay. What can we do with 8? I don't really necessarily want to tie 8 to 5. Because I mean, 5 connects to 6 and 7, which I do like that. I mean, maybe it's okay. Maybe level 9. Maybe level 9. Somebody had a good idea, which I kind of like. Maybe 9 has. So we've had balanced, right? Level 3A, level 3B are pretty balanced. Level 8A, level 9B are pretty balanced. Maybe there is a level 9B, but it's like kind of almost a sub level, but it's something very special, very unique, and very small. I don't know exactly what it is, but it could be something very, very strange and unique indeed. And we'll make that a little longer, and we can just do this. And now we kind of have 9B could go to 11. Oh, that's true. We did talk about 11. We did talk about level. That's our secret bonus level. Let me get a poll. Let me get a poll in chat. Let me get this in chat here. All right. Start a poll. So Shadowdark goes to level 10. what should be our final level? 10? Shadram, the Spinal Tap reference is not lost on me. 10? Because keep in mind, at this point, you can't gain any more levels, you know. Boothby's saying, we'll bring mythic rules to Shadowdark. I mean, I do like that idea, actually, quite a bit. I mean, if we put 10 back over here, then we can make our level 11 sort of super secret end game level here. And obviously 10 could go to 11, but you could literally skip the final boss of the dungeon and just go fight the super thing, you know? Thoughts of the incorporation of teleport circles, a must and will be included. These are the physical connections. They may not necessarily be stairways. They may be, shafts or stairways or something like that, but they would require no special, and they might be accessible via a key or lock or secret password or something like that in order to access them. But fundamentally, these are physical connections. But I absolutely would incorporate teleportation circles. Now, I wouldn't make them as ubiquitous as they are in Abomination Vaults, where like there's one on every level. But being able to sort of unlock what I would call fast travel. Torchbearer does this through the mapping mechanic, where your cartographer can your map maker can make a cartographer check in camp and map the areas that you've been on, which adds them to your map. And then now essentially you can click on them and fast travel to them. And that's really important because when I play a Mega Dungeon, I don't skip anything. And what that means is like, even if the party's like level 8, if they were starting at the top, I'd be like, okay, where are you guys going? And they're like, well, we go down to level 1. I'm like, all right, you're in the chamber of many stairs. Where do you go? And they're like, we go left. I'm like, you enter. They're like, yeah, we know. We enter in the middle room. We're like, we're going to head north up the stair. I would make you navigate from level 1 down to level 2, take the shortcut to 4, down to 5, 6, down to 8A, all the way to level 9A where you're actually playing. And that not only was that take time at the table, it would take time in the game. And that's torches and that's spells and that's duration. So eventually, you do want the players to feel rewarded when they find this thing that lets them kind of jump and skip parts of the dungeon that essentially they have really, 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 really beaten. I got to admit, this layout is kind of sick. I like this. I like the secret bonus level 11, I think. We'll see what the chat says here. 95% of you say level 11. So, like the Treasure Goblin Vault in Diablo series with crazy loot but insanely hard enemies. Right. Well, that's the thing. It's about giving players this option. They don't have to go there, but if they do and they beat it, then, like you could imagine that maybe level 11 has some of the craziest loot in the game. Your players go straight from level 8 to 9B to 11, they beat all these crazy monsters. By the time they go and fight the actual boss of the full dungeon, they're like, this is a joke. It's like when I remember when I'd beaten Diamond Weapon and Ruby Weapon and Emerald Weapon, and I had maxed out materia. When I fought Sephiroth the first time in Final Fantasy VII, Cloud quadra-cut him for 10K 4 times, 40K, and then Sephiroth hit him with his Angel Slice. He took 500 600 damage out of his 9,999, and then Cloud counterattacked like 6 times, each time doing 99999, and then I think Sid attacked once and then he was dead. All right, so Sean says, I don't like level 9B going to level 11. It might confuse players into thinking level 11 is level 10 or is the final boss. Now, Sean, we have just stumbled upon one of the cool things about old school dungeons. These things don't necessarily have labels. And so one of the things that you can do is it's not always necessarily 100% clear what level you are on just yet. And I kind of like that, So now I agree with what Rad is saying, that, telegraphing things, and you should be in awareness of this. It should not just be like, oh, we stumbled randomly into level 11. But, I kind of, again, part of the thing here is I don't want you to be forced to have to go through any one particular path to get to any one area of the dungeon. If your group decides, fuck your dragon, Derek, we know you have a hard on for ending your campaigns with big, huge, chromatic red, ancient red dragons. We're not going to do it. We're not going to do it. Screw you. And I'm like, we're skipping it. I don't want to force you to have to go fight my final boss just so that you could feel like whatever you have defined personal victory is for you and your party. Like, remember we were talking about that ancient beholder thing, how it was level 17? I don't know if there's anything in here that's level 20, but maybe Battle's Bestiary makes a level 20 monster. But maybe I've been, even not just in game, but out of game, me, the DM, have been like taunting the party when they say the hardest monster I have in this dungeon is level 20. It's a level 20 monster in a game that only goes to 10. And it's on level 11. And the party decides we don't even care about saving the town or beating the final boss. All we want to do is beat Derek's level 20 monster. And that's for us, that is the end of the campaign. Because there is no campaign, Shadowdark Core has the Tarrasque level 30. Oh shit. This is how little I know the game, Sean. All right, maybe that's a little bit extreme. I mean, you should have things that are okay. Rathgamon is level 19. I see that. Oh yeah, here we go. Tarrasque, level 30. Sick. Hey Torn, thank you. You're about to head out to play Rotted Capes. Cool. I hope you have a good night, dude. I rewatched the stream later. X3. Torn. Thank you so much. I appreciate the super chat and I appreciate the awesome support for that. That's fantastic. Rotted Capes is cool. I've actually flipped through that. It's pretty cool. Thanks you, man. Do we have a boss for level 11? Well, not yet. But yes, Iron Chestnut. This is one of the things I like about old school game. Players tend to set their own goals. Yes, because I'm not saying that, because here's the thing. You're like, oh, the players have to get to level 10 and defeat the dragon before he destroys the world. No, that dragon has been chilling on level 10 for the past 100 years. He's not going anywhere. Now, yeah, maybe the players do something that pisses him off and he decides to start getting uppity. But generally speaking, I don't put my players on that kind of timer. I don't make them have to be the big damn heroes. I don't make, Sephiroth is going to drop a meteor and destroy the world in 3 days. That's not what I'm trying to do here. This is a dangerous place with complex dynamic factions, and the player's actions could absolutely have consequences. But by and of itself, the things here are, kind of static in a certain extent. And the players aren't, I don't want to put my players under the threat of existential annihilation that is going to force them, because that kills the single greatest thing about exploring a dungeon, and that is exploration. When you are under the gun in any of these games, you can no longer, of free will and conscious, be exploring and looking around just to see what is going on, because the clock is ticking and you are about to, if you don't finish, I mean, it's one thing to like, oh, we ran out of torches and we have to go back to town. But if it's like the world is going to end, what kind of asshole are you because you wanted to go see if you could beat Emerald Weapon? I mean, again, video games get away with this all the time. In Final Fantasy VII, they, the whatever, Sephiroth summons Meteor. In 3 days, the world's going to end. You have to go to North Crater. You have to defeat him so that Holy can stop the meteor. But the game doesn't end if you go and say, I don't know, raise an entire generation of golden chocobos by engaging in racing and breeding programs over at the Golden Saucer so that you could go roam the world and fight the emerald and ruby weapons and get the final most powerful items and summons of the game, which is what I did. Even though technically in 3 days time, the world was going to end, but the game doesn't go, well, you decided to go race chocobos. So the game is over. I wasn't thinking we were going to go to 11, but also I just love the irony of going, our game goes to 11. I've loved dungeon design since I've visited Mammoth Cave all my life. Since I've been visiting Mammoth Cave all my life. You can see layers of history as you tour it, very complex connections throughout. Yes. And again, I mean, this is just a basic scaffolding of how I would see this dungeon coming together. And, we've made certain assumptions here and certain ideas. This may not necessarily be the final thing. Nothing's written in stone. But what I want to do is give an interesting, dynamic place that the party and the factions and the powerful forces that can, exist and interact in this dungeon space will have a place to engage. So it's 9:30. So what I want to finish up with real quick is to talk about teleporters. So while these are not necessarily going to be written in stone, I don't mind the idea of sort of thinking about where our warp worlds would be. Now, one idea I always love is the idea that there is a sort of portal on level 1 that actually takes you fairly deep into the dungeon, like maybe down to like level 7. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's active at the beginning of the game or that it's, going to be something the players are going to explore right away. It might not even be something that they can really activate until they get down to level 7. But I do like this idea that one of the longest, most powerful portals was staring them right in the face. In fact, part of me loves the idea that like you walk through this every time you enter the dungeon. You maybe didn't even realize it was a portal. Like imagine that the first, you come down the stairs, the ancient ruined stairs, and there's this like circular chamber, and it's got like 4 broken statues in the 4 corners of the circular chamber. And it's, it kind of seems like it's flavor text, but as you go throughout the course of the game, maybe you find like, the 4 energy crystals of fire, earth, air, water, fire. And then when you put them in, like that thing that you've been traveling through the whole dungeon is actually like the teleporter that takes you down to the bottom of the dungeon. That's where like players go like, wow, like we don't, like when you can make the ordinary seem extraordinary, it's a really cool moment. And I'm a big fan of it. Fundamentally, I'm going to go with 3 teleporters because I have 3 different shapes here. I've got squares, diamonds, and circles. So we've got our square teleporter that goes from 1 to 7. And then I like the idea of our diamond teleporter. Now you might say, oh, so 1 went to 7, so 2 goes to 8. No. 2 can go to 5. And then our circle can be on 6. And it can go to 9. I've always been a fan of moving portals. Yeah, I mean that's kind of a cool idea too. I don't dislike that actually. I've never done that before, Iron Chestnut. So you mean like, is it random or like, is it on a timer or something like that? Because I do like that idea a lot actually. That's a new idea for me actually. I'm kind of interested by that idea myself. But I'm just fundamentally thinking here about like as a player, how would I want to like shortcut this, dungeon? Because like I'm imagining maybe you never activate this portal, but there's a cool feature of a game when like you go in through level 1, your way through level 1 really quick, and you hop down to your portal that takes you from 2 to 5. You shoot over, you take your portal from 6 down to 9. And now you keep cleaning out. And like, you know the secret back roads, right? Like through the dungeon, the secret, connections and the secret tunnels and the secret magical passageways through the dungeon, even if you never found the 1 to 7 one. So again, I mean, this is just all of these things are subject to change. A sentient pair of portals. Okay. Now we're getting real crazy here. So I think, at a fundamental basis. Now, the only reason I want to caution, okay, I'm excited by this idea too, but I do want to caution. This is where too much of a good thing can be bad, right? I want to caution a little bit about the excitement. Hey, Kendall, nice to see you, and good night. I want to caution a little bit about getting too hyped up about things being random, because that is a mistake that a lot of people make with the OSR. They make it too random. And when you make it too random, you're taking away the player agency, the strategy, the tactics, the planning, and the game becomes a big, woo, fuck it, I don't care, you know, and it becomes a big kind of like YOLO, fuck it, you know, and nobody takes it seriously because it becomes so random. And exactly, Pathfinder, it diminishes the reward for exploring. I want players to feel like they earn these portals, that they've earned finding these entrances and these entrances to the game. So for me, I think it's really, really important, and I think it's really clear. While I think a certain amount of randomness is fun, especially if the players are buying into that randomness, you know, and they're accepting that randomness. That's one thing. But I do want to make it very important that the players, I think that's the big mistake that a lot of these OSR, not just games, but a lot of OSR products make, which is like, the more random, the better. Chaos, chaos, chaos. Wow. And I think that's diminishes the player agency, and it makes the game feel just a joke. It makes the game feel like you're just spinning the wheel. And I think that we should try to insulate ourselves from that a little bit as well. I don't know. I mean, I'm kind of digging what we got here. You know, again, we've got a couple different ways to get down. Maybe there's even another way to get to level 1. Level 1's an important level for sure. So maybe there's another non-dungeon based entrance. So there's 3 ways to get into level 1. We've got 3 ways to get to level 2, 4 ways to get to level 2. We can enter from this underground or secret passage. There's 2 ways from level 1, including the big shaft. There's the tower entrance. Yeah, this is cool. I'm digging this. And again, the thing here is there is no clear linear route. I couldn't guarantee that the players would ever even see some of these levels at all. I mean, they might go from 1 to 2 to 3A to 5 to 7 to 9A and beat the campaign, having never seen level 6, any level 8, level 4, level 3B, right? Like they could literally have skipped 50% of the dungeon. I'm okay with that. In fact, I want to encourage that. Right? Their rope might break when they start heading down the shaft, and their whole dungeon experience is them being trapped in the dungeon. Now let's flesh it out from the top-down view. Well, that takes a lot longer, Keith. That's where we're gonna have to kind of go from that perspective. Hey, Erica, thank you.
Erica tipped $25. Love that 2025 is shaping up to be Year of the Dungeon. Keep 'em coming.
Erica, thank you so much. Erica becomes our hype boss. Yeah, Year of the Dungeon indeed. I think dungeons are really cool. They're not for every system. I want to be very clear about that. But I do think that they work particularly well in a game like Shadowdark. And I think that it's going to be a cool experience. Obviously, there's a lot of people watching us tonight, and I don't know. I actually haven't looked at my stats. Did we get to it? Yeah, we had how many people? We had like close to 100 people at one point. We're about 70 people now. You know, as time things tend to wind down as we go on. But yes, 69, nice. But yeah, I think there is a value in this style of play that I think a lot of people get mixed up and messed up. Now, this is the last thing I want to say before I sign off for the night. And then thank you again, Erica, for that very generous tip. Appreciate it. I was talking, Erica, to a friend of mine who works at Starbucks. I mean, he works there part-time. He works down, but he was talking to me about going to the I think it's called the Four Chords concert. I think it's in Pittsburgh. The one day it's like Blink 182 and Jimmy Eat World. And I was like, I haven't been to a concert in a long time. And I was like, maybe I need to go to a concert. 4 chords, 2 chords, it's something like that. But it's in like the end of it's like at the end of summer. She says go. She said go. But I do love Jimmy Eat World. I mean, that's one of my favorite. That's one of my all-time favorites. Blink-182 is fine. Like, you know, I mean, I could sing a Blink song like anybody else, but Jimmy Eat World is great. Right, I'd buy the supplement, but I buy everything.
Shadram tipped $15. Tipping for part 2. Would love to get into how you go about populating dungeon levels to keep them interesting and fun.
Yeah, absolutely, Shadram. I mean, like, this would obviously be a very, you know, exhaustive process, and we would have to, you know, obviously go step by step by step. And again, this is fundamentally a high level, and I appreciate the support, Shadram. But, you know, because there's a couple of really important questions that would need to be answered from this. And the one is, which is hugely important, is do you have empty rooms? And I've talked about empty rooms in the past, and I personally believe that they are not great. It's one thing to have like a very distinctly purposefully empty room, but for the most part, I feel like empty rooms are a waste of game time. And part of the reason that Gary Gygax put empty rooms in his dungeon was specifically to waste the player's time. And the challenge was, you know, it was a you know, it's like a red herring. It's a time suck. It was to make them waste their time at the session, make them waste their time at the game, make their waste of torches and random encounters, and basically eat up their time. And it was a skill testing factor, right? Like the superior player would be able to quickly identify that this is not worth their time and move on, which is fair, but terrible. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that I like about Gary Gygax, but I don't necessarily agree with everything he says. And the reason why I bring that up is just because even as a GM, I'm not here to watch players beat their heads against the wall because there's a gazebo, you know, or because there's what's the critical role, the chair. That's not entertaining for me, and I don't personally find it entertaining for anybody. And I don't want to be the GM who goes, there's nothing here, ignore it. If I'm going to be drawing something and prepping something and putting it into my dungeon, there are only so many rooms that I can put into my dungeon. And if I'm going to put that in there, you know, then I want it to be worth it. Now, Sean says empty rooms could provide hints of things to come, or does a room with clues not count as empty? No, that wouldn't be an empty room. An empty room to me is truly an empty room. You know, the classic, if you pick up any D&D module from the last 50 years and you'll find a room where it's like, blah, 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 windswept, dust to the corners, blah, blah. There was nothing of note here, blah, blah, blah. It's just nothing. A room empty doesn't necessarily mean that there's no monster or creature or trap or encounter. If it includes hints and lore and things to engage with in a meaningful way, that is not empty by any stretch of the imagination. And so I don't think every room should have an encounter. Let me be very clear about that. Every room should not have an encounter for sure. But should it have something? This room is empty is only worthwhile if you're being paid by the word count. I just feel like as a person, I paid for this dungeon. I paid for this map. Or if I'm a GM, I'm drawing this map. Why do I want to put something in here that I know is just going to waste their time and my time? I just don't get it. Now, there are some people who like the idea of a quantum room. So it's empty in the sense it's not empty. You'll just roll randomly when the players open it up. I have gone on record as saying I am not a huge fan of random dungeon creation. Now, does that mean I'm I haven't rolled randomly generated dungeons in my day? Of course I have. What I don't like about random dungeon creations is I view each encounter and each room as an opportunity to help tell the story, of the dungeon. And when it's random, it tends not to do that particularly well. Because it's just random. It doesn't tell part of the story. It doesn't help. So what story in the dungeon? Like, for example, one of my core ideas is that this dungeon was not built all at the same time or by the same people. Obviously, the lower levels might have been built first, or maybe not. Maybe they were built later, later on. Maybe the oldest part of the dungeon is level 8, and level 9 and 10 came later. And maybe a dwarven, a dwarven empire or a mind flayer expeditionary force moved in seeking the power, and they carved out levels 5 and 4. And that information is something that the players can learn about as they go through the game. And it's not just like, oh, that's interesting, but it might be part of the key or solution to, having the players find clever solutions to problems, figuring out interesting ways to beat the challenges of the dungeons. And the most important thing is, I don't want to have a defined answer for every single encounter. Part of the problem is that the players may surprise me by using what they have, Would you connect the physical connections ever? Or is that something you do later on? There would be an offshoot of the path from 8B to 9A that accesses 9B. No, 8B to 9A, this is very specifically like one passage, a stairway, a shaft, something that takes you vertically down into the dungeon. Now, could you have a multi-split situation? Sure. And we kind of did that here, right? Where this is the idea of that this is a single shaft, or maybe it's a circular staircase or something that goes all the way from level 1 to level 2 to level 3. But, you could have a situation where you have something that, splits between the two of them and gives you options for that. That is an interesting option, Shadram. But fundamentally, I just think that that this is you want to avoid making things too random and too capricious, because then the dungeon starts to feel like what a lot of people don't like about dungeons. A lot of people go, oh yeah, it's like, oh yeah, okay, what was your dungeon? Somebody went to donjon.com, they went to donjon.com and they were like, okay, random dungeon. They're like, okay, it's the, you're like, yeah, guys, I got a dungeon tonight. It's the Cyst of Emrakul the Chaotic. And you're like, look at this dungeon. Look at it. It's so huge. And it's like, it's literally just a bunch of random nonsense. And it's like, what are the rooms? Well, room 1 has a locked iron door and a trapped stone door. And this one has a locked wooden door and a secret arrow trap. And, this one is trapped with a poison needle, and there's a fallen demonic icon. Oh, there's a homunculus in this room. And then in the next room are 16 rats. I think a lot of people have experienced big dungeons that are like this. And these tend to suck. I don't know. I mean, they just do. They just suck. There's no flow. There's no lore. There's no history. Nothing makes sense. So it's, yeah. I haven't been on that website in years. It's still there. So anyways, that's all I was trying to say there from that. Dr. Stevel says, level 5 was the bottom of the original dungeon. Lower levels were built going upward until they breached into the upper levels and have an alien design. Dr. Stevel, that's an awesome idea. And one of the things that I really like to do is this idea that, you have different eras of the dungeon's construction, right? So, maybe, the stuff on levels 1 and 2 has a certain style, a certain style to it. But then the dungeons on levels 3, 4, and 5 were all built by the same group. But then these dungeons are even stranger and weirder or more magical. Because again, part of the idea is that as we go down, right, things get more magical, more difficult, more strange, more weird. And I think that that's a cool thing. Now, this is the last thing I'm going to say before I sign off, is that dungeons, mega dungeons, even in the modern day era, suffer from one major problem. And they've always suffered from this. And I'm always experimenting with different ways of combating this problem. And that problem is the 15-minute adventuring day. Now, the last time I ran a big mega dungeon was Pathfinder 1 was Dragon's Delve. And the way I solved this was because Pathfinder 1 had CR and EL systems, is I created a system whereby the more encounters that you encountered in a given day, you got bonus experience points and bonus treasure. So if you could go to the dungeon, fight 1 or 2 fights, go back to town, rest up, come back, you could do that all you want. But if you stayed for like 4 or 5 encounters, you got a little bit of bonus experience points and treasure. And if you stayed for like 8 encounters, you got a lot of bonus experience points. And if you stayed for 12 encounters, you got an even shitload more experience encounters. So naturally, my players spent I think they spent 4 sessions. So 20 hours of play. It was 1 day of the dungeon. And on the same set of resources, because they wanted just to see how far they could push it and get to the crazy star trees. So Woodland Fellowship, it is a lot like what Draw Steel does with Victories. Now, Shade brings up a great point. Can't you restock or fortify the dungeon to discourage frequent leavings? Shade, you absolutely can. And I've done that before, Shade, but this is coming from my experience. It has 2 big problems. 1, it can be frustrating for the players to feel like they have to fight all the same monsters again. Now, I understand that that's part of the reason it's a dissuasion, but let's be clear here. This is a stick, not a carrot. Okay. The other method I was talking about, giving you bonus experience points for staying, that's a carrot. What you're describing is a stick. If you leave, the monsters might refill. Now, that's true to a certain extent, but also realize that most of the time, now in original D&D, you recovered 1 hit point per day of rest. To be honest with you, I don't know if Sean's still here. I don't know what it is in Shadowdark. So we should probably look that up. Kelsey, you don't have an index? No, Kelsey. Resting. Here we go. Yep, a character who successfully regains all lost hit points and recovers all stat damage. So, 1 night's rest in Shadowdark puts you to full hit points. And while fortifying and restocking is totally reasonable, there's only so much that you could reasonably expect would happen in a single night. But the other problem is, that's a lot of work for the GM. And it could be annoying, especially if the players are like, we just want to go back to town, rest. That literally might take 15 minutes, in real time. And if you sit there and say, all right, guys, hold on, wait a second. I got to roll on a bunch of charts and I got to respock and I got to have all this other stuff. Okay. That is, it could be a momentum killer. It can break things down. Now, I'm not saying that monsters shouldn't, quote unquote, respawn and that the factions shouldn't take actions, and they should, and they would. And I think we would probably definitely address that, particularly the difference between, and let's be clear here, there's a difference between a living faction with multiple members and forces versus the crystal golem that's on level 3. The crystal golem on level 3, once it's destroyed, it's probably not coming back. It's not literally an MMO, right? Where if it's like, oh, well, after 24 hours, it comes back up. Now, Sean says resting in dungeons will come with multiple random encounter checks. It also needs a campfire, which takes 3 torches to create. The problem is, now, that's great, Sean. The problem is, why would you rest in the dungeon? What would be the reason that you would do that? Now, it may come up, which is fine. Which is totally fine. But the thing is that generally speaking, in most Mega Dungeon campaigns, not all of them, in most Mega Dungeon campaigns, the nearby town isn't that far away. The Mega Dungeon usually, historically, is not out in the middle of nowhere. Now, that is one way that you can make dungeons leaving and coming back problematic, is by making it really far away to the next town. But that essentially is relying upon a lot of random encounters to risk going between the dungeon and town, which works, but again, isn't necessarily, I think, as fun as I want it to be. Okay? Now, Pathfinder says, I am thinking that if a dungeon level is cleared, would it make sense that something else might move in? Eventually, Pathfinder PhD, but let's be clear here. I don't want to make level 2 into level 5 just because you're level 5, right? If that makes any sense. I don't want to steal from the players their sense of accomplishment. So this is my thought for what I would want to explore with this. It's something that Aaron and I have discussed for a while, and we've never really fully implemented it in a true fashion. And like all things, it is stolen from smarter people than me, sort of. That is EverQuest in one of their later expansions, the original EverQuest, introduced a system called the tribute system. And the way the tribute system worked is your character could spend a certain amount of gold to gain a buff for a certain amount of time. And that is essentially what I kind of want to do here. Because one of the biggest problems that you have in games like this is you get gold, but there's usually magical item shops and things like that are very frowned upon, and rightfully so. Now, Shadowdark does a better job of this than most OSR games. In most OSR games, you literally are getting hundreds, if not thousands of gold pieces. It's absolutely ridiculous. But the way Kelsey has described hers, rather than it literally being a flat 1 XP for 1 GP, if you find an incredible treasure, right, which could be hundreds of gold pieces, it's only worth 3 XP, say. But you're still going to end up with all this gold. So what to do with it? Now, part of the original conceit of D&D was that people would use it because there weren't magical item shops. So part of the conceit was that you were going to spend all of this gold so that you could become a lord of the domain and build a castle or build a thieves guild or build a temple. And that is cool. And that is the original end game of both basic D&D in the form of basic, extra, companion, master, immortal, but also AD&D, after which at 9th level, when you became name level, your character would, gain followers, and the expectation was that you were going to be building cities and marshaling armies and starting cults, which is cool. But I have found over the years, as much as I would love to say that I love this, is that people don't like doing that. People are here to play the dungeon, and I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And for the most part, I have found that that high-level stuff has not really worked out. So what can we tap into then? We can tap into the fact that players are greedy, thrifty, petty bastards. So what we can do, now Sean is right. They do have a carousing system to eat up money, and it could be a money sink. That's true. The carousing tables are a good start, and I don't mind them. But the problem I have with the carousing system, Sean, is the problem with the carousing system is it interacts with what I think is the least interesting part of Shadowdark. And the least interesting part of Shadowdark is leveling up. And I mean that in a good fashion. But I just mean that I just find that going to get XP so that you can spend your gold to get more XP is not really much of a choice if all you're trying to do is level up. So the idea of the tribute system is basically, as Shadram said, well, not exactly what Shadram said, is you basically can spend gold. Is you can spend gold to gain essentially what we'll call buffs that last a certain amount of time. Hours, 1 day. And once you spent that gold, it is locked in. Now, thematically, it might be like maybe if you leave an offering at the shrine of the ruby goddess, it grants you this bonus. And it lasts for 24 hours, or it lasts for whatever. Players are going to be able to strategically use their gold to gain these very powerful or very niche buffs. But also, they are going to be able to find new tribute locations in the dungeon itself. So they might find the Veil of the Dark Lady shrine on level 2. And if you go there and spend the money, you get this buff that lasts for a certain amount of time. And you may not want this buff every time you adventure. You may only want it sometimes. You may want it never. But you'll have all these different options. And the point is that when the party wants to, they can spend their gold to kind of supercharge up. But once they do that, they have priced in a lot of their money into these buffs. And I promise you, unless you have the most unengaged, uncaring players ever, in which case you have a bigger problem than this, they are going to want to milk these things for all that they are worth. Because if somebody says, well, we should just go back to town and rest, everyone's going to say, then all of our buffs will end. I sort of came upon this when in earlier days of D&D, or like 3rd edition D&D, I was a big fan of letting players acquire and buy even higher level scrolls. So your characters might be level 3, but they found some level, spell level 5 or 6 spell, very powerful. And they would use it and get some really crazy buff, like a powerful buff that you normally shouldn't have access to until you're like character level 9, but they're level 3 and they have access to it. And they go, oh man, we are going to milk this for all that we have because it was a consumable. It was a one-time thing. And those were some of the best sessions that we ever had. So I'm wondering if I can mechanize that in the dungeon and not just make it something that you just go to town and do, but actually make it part of the allure of exploring the dungeon. Shadron, take care. We're going to be wrapping up here soon ourselves. Is finding these new, we'll call them shrines, these new tribute shrines where players are going to be excited to sort of build up this repertoire of shrines that they know about, that they have in their back pocket. And it's kind of a way of letting them buy essentially like one-shot magic items. It's kind of a way of letting them buy consumables, but doing it in a way that isn't just magic item shop. And I think this should have a very cool effect. One, I think it should make it so that players feel very compelled to try to get the most for their money. And at the very least, even if they do go right back to town after spending their gold to get their buffs, at least they know and you know that they spent a lot of money for that privilege of just being able to go back to town. Secondly, I think it'll allow the players to be more strategic, even for players like fighters who don't normally get access to spells, because you'll be able to sort of strategically select and find different shrines and activate different powers as you feel is appropriate to deal with certain threats that are emerging on different levels. And I think that's very cool. I think using the dungeon as a resource, viewing the dungeon not just as a place, like it starts off as a dangerous place that is unknown to you, but as you learn its secrets, as you the player master the dungeon, it becomes more like an ally. It becomes something that you are comfortable with. It becomes something that you could rely on. And again, this is an experience that I had a lot when I used to play EverQuest, where you would go into these zones. Let me see if I can find if you've never seen like these maps, like these old EQ maps, I mean, like they are torturously complicated, right? I mean, like these zone maps are very confusing. And this is old Gook, this is the live side and the dead side. And when you first enter this as a new player, this is all chaotic and nonsense to you. And none of this makes any, everything is scary, everything's going to kill you, everything's conning red. But after you've been leveling here for, weeks or months, this is like, your old friend. Someone's like, hey, check noble, check ghoul, check noble. And then they're like, cool. And you're like, cool, I'll run right to you. And about the illusionary wall and you pop right through it and you press to the one wall to avoid aggroing. It's like you become, this sort of master of this environment that started off as being like, I have no fucking idea what's going on. And that kind of environmental mastery, I think, is very appealing and very powerful. And I think it's something that I have lost. Yes, the terrain to zone. And you know what that means. You find Slee Stack control panels. I don't know what Slee Stack is. You plug valuable gems into activate effects. I mean, that could absolutely be an idea. I mean, that could be a cool thing in and of itself, Dr. Steve-O, right? Where there's one shrine where you can only put rubies, you know? LFG Executioner. Yes. I'm trying to get that FBSS. So yeah, or was it the Ghoul Assassin? Who dropped was it Ass Sup that dropped the FBSS? All right, I was like, dropped by Lower Gook, yeah. Dropped by the Frenzied Ghoul. That's who dropped it. The Frenzied Ghoul. This guy. Yeah. He dropped the Flowing Black Silk Sash, which was like one of the coolest items in original EverQuest because it gave your character haste so you could attack faster. Look at that. 21% haste buff, boy. All right. Anyways. So, you know, we're all influenced by our own things. And so I'm influenced by obviously some of the great classic mega dungeons that I've played growing up. Rapana Thuk, Lost City of Baracus, Undermountain, Dragon's Delve, but even modern ones like Abomination Vaults and Dwemer Mount, which I guess isn't like super relevant, super new, but I'm also really influenced by games like EverQuest. And the original EQ had such a great way of doing these big dungeons, and I loved the mastery that came with it. And you know, one of my favorite memories from when we ran Dragon's Delve in Pathfinder 1, our player Zach, who was the group's primary mapper, I would make them describe how to get to where they were going. Zach knew the dungeon so well, he didn't even need the map anymore. They would start at the surface of the dungeon, and he would just, all right, we're going to go 50 feet north to the room, and we're going to, you know, to whatever, we're going to turn left. We're going to tap the secret panel on the mural. We're going to pass through that. We're going to go down the poop chute. They had, you know, names. They had like nicknames for stuff. We're going to go down the poop chute to level 2. We're going to pass through the secret thing. We're going to cast daylight on the 7, you know, crystal spheres, which will go open through the secret door. We'll go through the secret door, and like just boom, 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 boom. We'll go to the secret door. Desitim, we'll enter that. We'll enter into the prison of the Red Saint. You know, Foso Roladate Qua, and like bypass it, teleport to the exit. I mean, like he had this almost encyclopedic knowledge of the dungeon, and that's cool. That's very powerful. And a lot of my other players did as well, but he was in particular very, very sensitive to it, and I enjoyed that. So, yeah. Now, what is the point of Project Shadowdeep? Well, the point of Project Shadowdeep is, working with my patrons, but also my live streams, to see if maybe we can start to build, some themes and ideas around this dungeon. Put in some of the things that, you know, there's still some groundwork that needs to be laid in, and then maybe start to draw a map and build this stuff. Because I'll be honest with you, this is hard to do in a game like PF2 because you're so worried about balance. But when you're playing an old school game, there is not, the concept of balance is a lot murkier, and so you can get away with a lot more. Is how I would put it. So I'm thinking it'll be fun. And also, again, this is also sort of a nod of respect to Shadowdark. And while, you know, when the game first came out, I did not kickstart it. You know, again, my copy had to be given to me by the folks at Arcane Library. And I think it's great, but I didn't appreciate that this game was going to seize the zeitgeist of people. And if it means that there's a way that I can maybe share some of my love of dungeons and mega dungeons with a new generation of people who are exploring this game for the first time, maybe they came from 5th edition, then I'm all about it. And I will happily, maybe try to make something and make my mark to the community and add that. And who knows, maybe, with the patrons' help and with your help, maybe this is something that we do. You know, you saw Steven Glicker from Roll for Combat came in and immediately it was like, I'll publish it, you know. So maybe that's something cool that we can all kind of work on together a little bit and build, and maybe something we can publish. It'd be kind of cool. I don't know. I mean, it'll take a long time. I mean, I don't cut corners. I mean, you saw it took me 3 hours just to outline how we want to connect the levels, because, you know, these things are very methodical and important to me. So, all right. So there we go. We got level 1, level 2, 3A, 3B, which do not connect to 4, 5, 6, and 7, down to 8A, 8B, 9A, 9B, 10, and yes, secret level 11. Ours goes to 11. All right. Well, a lot of people to thank tonight, so I definitely want to make sure I do that. Hey, and Sean coming in with even more thanks. Sean, thank you. Says, thanks for this, Derek. It was great to hear all your lessons and insights for making a dungeon. Well, Sean, I think we're going to go, we're going to go hard from here, and maybe, who knows? I mean, I with 11 levels, I would definitely think that we would do at least 400 rooms would be what I would kind of roughly want to get around. But there's a part of me that would want to do 500 rooms just because it's like over 500 rooms. What's crazy is that dungeon is bigger than the caverns of Thracia. Yes. However, I promise you, it is not bigger than the Slumbering Tsar saga, which is that thick and letter-sized. This, I think, is like the largest mega. I mean, Halls of Art and Vol might be. It's probably not as large. This is honestly ridiculously large. I don't even know if they have. I don't know. There's a lot. Oh, there's a lot in here. You've never heard of that Megadungeon? This is huge. Yeah, so Slumbering Tsar Saga is kind of like considered the Slumbering Tsar Saga is the Silmarillion to Rapana-Thuk being Lord of the Rings, in that this is a prequel, but also kind of larger and in some ways more important. What else we got? We got so by point of comparison, right? Like this is Dwimmermount, and you can see that, you know, Dwimmermount is noticeably thinner than this. But yeah, Dwimmermount by James. This was Axe compatible. I also have a Sword and Sorcery one. And of course we have Rapana-Thuk and, you know, all the greats. But you know, there's some pretty good stuff here. So yeah, I mean, Caverns of Thracia. Let me be clear here. Caverns of Thracia is a great module, and it's legendary for a reason. But I don't know that I would call Caverns of Thracia a mega dungeon, Cal. It's a dungeon. It's a proper dungeon, but I don't think it's a mega dungeon. Thank you, Pathfinder PhD. I'm glad you enjoyed the series. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So with that in mind, I do want to give a quick shout out to everybody. So thank you, Sunhawk, for starting us off with a tip before we even started the stream. For properly donating towards Shadowdark Megadungeon development. Thank you, IKMOS, for the super chats. Thank you, Chase, for your tip. Sean, for your numerous super chats. Thank you, Sean. Cal, thank you for your super chat. Mindblown Whoopelstein, thank you for your $50 super chat. Mindblown super chatted a couple more times. Thank you, Mindblown, again. Torn180, thank you so much for that. I'm glad you got to pop in for a little bit, and hopefully you had a good session with Rotted Capes. Erica, thank you for supporting the Year of the Dungeon. And Shadram, thank you for tipping for part 2. I still have traumatic flashbacks to Rapana-Thuk. I mean, Rapana-Thuk was a lot of fun, but Rapana-Thuk also, in my opinion, suffered a little bit from that sort of Tomb of Horror style dungeon. And I like that stuff, but let me be very clear, when it's too deadly, it can make people become fatalistic, cynical, and they check out and they don't care. And I don't want to encourage that. I want people to feel like this is a dangerous place, but an exciting place. I want it to feel the way that I felt as a young man playing EverQuest and going into a zone like Solosec, or going into a State of Unrest, or going into, even as a young, you know, Blackborough, but really like a State of Unrest Lower Gook, Mistmore. I mean, some of these places are just etched in my memory. And, while some of them were what I would call probably more dungeon sized, like Crushbone or Blackburrow, Lower Gook was definitely a proper, I assume you mean Keswick Thule. I don't know if you're trying to say Keswick Thule, but Keswick Thule, sure. I mean, these places were just, indelibly linked in my mind there. So, yeah, there you go. Keswick Thule, yes. And so I love those places, and I think that those places are awesome and fun and exciting, and I love that they were difficult. And by the way, the original EverQuest did not have auto mapping. There was no auto map, and when you pushed M, nothing came up. It was a blank. You had to draw your own map at best. There was no auto map feature, so the only way you learn these dungeons is through experience and advice and lessons and rumors and hearing other people's stories. It was, for me, no MMO has ever come close. I'll put it that way, because the flaws became what made it good, is what I'm trying to say. And so OSR has some flaws, but maybe we can tap into those to get into some of the goodiness. So yeah, there you go. I mean, my love of Megadungeons plus my love of EverQuest 1. That's really what we're going for here. Plus the fact that Shadowdark is just gripped an entire generation of people, and it's just doing so well, and it's just so beloved, and it's just so well supported, and Kelsey is just doing all the right things with the game, and it's just got this powerful groundswell, and it'd be cool to support it, because I think it's a cool movement. The new old school, I guess. And I said that on the One Roll for Combat stream. I said, like, to me, D&D is becoming the mainstream game, and this is becoming like the basic D&D box set of the 1980s, No, I mean, I think, once, this is a side tangent, but once MMOs, because they wanted to increase, the playability and the lack of griefing and the lack of whatever, once MMOs started moving to things like instance dungeons and teleport portals and looking for dungeon finders, the game may have became infinitely more playable, but it also lost everything about it that made it special. And none of them have ever really held my EverQuest 2, World of Warcraft. None of them ever really held my attention the way that some of those early or late 90s, early 2000s MMOs held my attention. So I agree with you. All right, folks. Well, 10:15. Thanks again for the incredible support tonight. Looks like we're going to be back with more Project Shadowdark. I don't know that the dungeon will actually be called Shadowdark, but Project Shadowdeep. I don't know that the dungeon will be called the Shadowdeep. Maybe it should. If you think put a comment below. What do you think the dungeon should be named? We have no idea what the theme is yet, so that's why it's fun. But it is going to be Project Shadowdeep, because studies have shown that if you put shadow or gloom or dark in your Kickstarter, fantasy Kickstarter, you are going to you do 50% more. So we're on board for that. So thank you, everybody. Or Borg. Yes. But even I have my, okay. Final thing. The truth is, for a long time, people have been asking me on this channel, Derek, when are you going to create something? When are you going to kickstart something? When are you going to, produce something? And the truth of the matter is, I never felt like I was tapped into something enough that I really was passionate about that wouldn't just have been, a money play. I'm not saying that everybody who does a Kickstarter is doing a money play, but I don't know how truly passionate they are about the game. There's mixed emotions. This is something I would do anyways. And so the fact that so for example, would I ever make a Borg game even if I was guaranteed to do $1 million Kickstarter? No, because I don't like that game and I don't like the style of the art. But I do like Shadowdark, and I do like what it represents. And so the fact that I would probably build this dungeon anyways means that if I can do it under Shadowdark and maybe actually, get something that people would want to play because it's not some obscure system. Derek created a mega dungeon for, Torchbearer mouse guard hack that he made. Where your dungeon delving mice who die of starvation in the deeps. So something that's a little bit more popular gives me a lot more reason to do that. So, I never got into EVE Online because I never got into the sci-fi RPG MMOs too much, but I know a lot of people who sucked way too many hours into EVE. So the ISK must flow. The Knights of Last Crawl, that's actually pretty good. Dark Shadow Gloom. I mean, Smith generated this like random Kickstarter name generator, or it was called like the random $1 million Kickstarter name generator, and it was just all a bunch of like roll on the one table and then roll on the other table, and it was all like mythic dark, or it was like legends of gloom, or like legends of shadow, and it was just like all these random combinations of like buzzwords and various dark, gloom, grim type things. Yes, shadow, gloom, dark haven caverns. I have not played Pantheon. I've heard about it, but I've never played it. I mean, I don't have the time for it anymore anyways. But I mean, Shadowdeep is definitely a good name for the project. I don't know if it'll be the best name for the actual game. Shadowdeep Borg, yes, with a 64 action economy. Yeah, we're breaking through. So awesome, Sean. Well, we'll have to talk at Origins, buddy. Number 1, so we can hang out. Number 2, so I could see your fit new bod. I'm hoping I can be down like 20 pounds by Origins. When's Origins? June. So it's like April, May, most of June. Yeah. Okay. So it's like maybe like 10 or 11 weeks away. I think I can lose 20 pounds. So that's my goal. I want to be like 225 by Origins. That would be pretty cool. Good stuff. All right. Well, thank you, everybody, for hanging out with me tonight. Thank you for being part of the process. Thank you for joining me. And again, this is going to be way more active on our Patreon. So if you want to take a look, we have a link in the description below, patreon.com/nightslastcall. You can join at our night level, champion level. There's a bunch of different levels, give you different access benefits, but they all get you into the Patreon, and you can come hang out with us and talk about that, and we can go from there. So for everybody else, I'll see you next time on Night's the Last Call. Thanks. Good night.